Well, hello, regular Drews. Just a really quick cold open for you here to give a little content warning that this book is heavy on the spiders. So we talk about that a lot in this episode. So just a warning that if you perhaps have a terrible spider fear, you may want to skip this and you don't have to feel bad about it.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Well, aren't you a regular Nancy Drew?
I learned that from the Nancy Drew detective.
Okay, go.
You think you can follow the clues and solve the case of the missing condiment, Nancy Drew?
Because I've read every Nancy Drew mystery ever written.
Nancy, please tell me you're joking.
Wow, you suck at this Nancy Drew stuff. You should get a new hobby.
My name is Carson Drew, and this is my assistant, Nancy.
Nancy Drew.
It's curtains for you, Miss Drew.
Nancy Drew strikes again.
A regular Nancy Drew.
Hello, regular Drews.
Hi, everyone.
Today, we will be discussing mystery story number 21, Secret in the Old Attic.
Yes. I can definitely see why this one is a fan favorite, or I feel like I've heard that it's a fan favorite a lot, and I definitely understand why now.
Yeah, it just feels, well, okay. Yes, I understand that, and I think it was pretty good. To me, it just seems like standard, typical Nancy Drew book.
Okay.
Like, when I think of a Nancy Drew book, this is almost exactly what I think of.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah. I will say I read the revised text, not the original text. The revised text was published in 1970 and revision was done by Priscilla Baker Carr. And then the original text was published in 1944. And that is the Mildred Wirt Benson.
And I did read both.
Okay.
I will say that it was like pretty much the exact same story
Really?
from the original to the revised. I know, like, for example, when we did Twisted Candles, it was pretty much the same thing with a few, like, the first names were changed. There's really none of that. It's pretty much the exact same, except there's an entire Ned drama side plot that they completely removed.
Oh,
right.
Dang it.
And it's so juicy. And so it kind of connects in a little bit more. And so obviously I'll give you the rundown on what that side plot is a little bit later.
I'm
but
so
they
excited.
they did, it wasn't a huge change, but they did take out a little bit that made me feel like they made it a little bit less spooky, especially at some of the parts that were like the most like heightened sense of danger in certain scenes.
Okay, that's interesting though, because when I read this, I was like, holy crap. Like some of the scenes in there were terrifying. So, wow.
This may be like the most afraid I've ever been while reading a Nancy Drew book. Like, I know that it's tropey that like, oh, the ghost isn't going to be real. It's very Scooby-Doo. The mask is going to be taken off at the end. No, like I've never actually felt a sense of like fear and terror reading one of these books. And in this, I definitely did for the original. The revised, again, I knew it was coming. And so they, not minimized, but they like reduced the amount of scare factor involved, I think, just because, I don't know, Mildred's writing, it's not like Walter Kerr where it's more atmospheric than the revised text writing, but just like the action, it like gets the pacing, your adrenaline gets pumped up a lot while you're reading it. And so there was a part where like everything is just kind of revolving around each other, all these different moving parts of the mystery. And then Nancy's like passed out in the factory, and it's just like the most heart-pounding moment. It's so good. But otherwise, it's ultimately the same story. So yeah.
Okay. Well, good to know. Good to know. Yeah, no, that's wild to think about because, this book is scary, like pretty intense. But like, I feel like it's such like a standard mystery story, not in a bad way at all, but just like, very tropey, like, two separate mysteries, end up being kind of the same mystery at the end. And, even like this is not like my favorite trope at all. This is actually one of the reasons why I disliked the book a little bit. Not a lot, but like it's not something I enjoyed, was like the trope of Nancy like going back to the same location and searching it a bajillion times. And like really that's the only mystery solving that she's doing is searching the same location again and again and again. But I liked it overall because I feel like the plot in and of itself, there was not a whole lot that felt super unrealistic or seemed like that ridiculous. Like it all seemed kind of plausible, which I feel like is a rare thing for a mystery story sometimes, except for the inclusion of the Black Widows. That was a little ridiculous, but effective in what I think it was trying to do, which was really make it scary. But we should definitely talk about that later because it's not as scary as the book makes it out to be.
There was a slight change in that with the original to the revised as well. So I'm interested to hear what you think about it. But yes.
Okay. But this is also another rich people problem story, or at least formerly rich people problems, which we'll talk about too. But so just classic Nancy Drew mystery, in my opinion. But yeah.
I want to know, when are we getting the game adaptation of this book? Because I feel like it would be so good. I know that the repeated searching thing is a little bit annoying, but in a game that would actually make sense and would translate well if you like keep coming back to like find something else. You solve a puzzle and then like, you know, a panel in the wall opens and then you can go in and do another puzzle. And then I feel like it would translate really well to a game. For some reason.
It would. Yeah. You're totally right. But especially too because there's something really amorphous about the setting as it is. Not in like a bad way, but like it's very much set in that house. You know what I mean? Like that's the main setting. So you could definitely do a game that's just in that house alone.
Or just the factory in the house, and then you have all the like bad guy suspects involved with the factory and everything.
Or it would also make it really easy to do a mashup of this with another story.
That's true.
To give it a more colorful kind of setting. You know what I mean? So you could kind of go either way with it. Because in this book, it's, set in this manor house that's in River Heights-ish. It's maybe a little bit outside of River Heights because it's far enough away from the Drew home where Nancy has to like drive back and forth a lot. But also like there are like some other locations that are like just outside of town. So it's really like a River Heights-ish mystery. And of course we don't get a lot of games set in River Heights.
Right.
So I feel like you could really set it anywhere that you wanted to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I do like that you could just like pull the attic element out of this story as well and combine it with something else. That would actually be perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. But also there's something really compelling too about like the music element to the story, which I feel like is something that's not super, I feel like it's not done in any other game. I feel like if you like, I mean, like sometimes there's music in the game, sometimes they'll talk about music, but this mystery is really music centric.
Right.
And we don't really have a lot of mysteries in the Nancy Drew games that are about music. Like the closest I think we get is Sea of Darkness.
Sure.
But really that's not what this is about. So we don't really have any music themed games.
Or maybe Silent Spy, but even still. Yeah.
That's because that's really about espionage.
Right. And
whereas this is about like music plagiarism. Like it's very specific.
It'd be a great edutainment factor in a game as well. Really dig into like learning about music and how to read music and the history of instrument or whatever, you know.
Yeah, and maybe one of the settings is a recording studio and Nancy has to like fill in for like a recording tech or something and record someone's like session or something. And
surely there's a file that's like music industry centric that you could combine with Old Attic, and she finds like plagiarized music in somebody's old attic somewhere. Perfect.
Yes.
Her Interactive, we've got your next game. Call us. We're ready.
Done.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about the cover art a little bit?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Of course. I actually don't have the second or the first snappy one. The second cover art of the two, which is, I think, probably the most iconic of the three.
Yeah, I have also the most recent. So there's 3 different versions that I could see, not including international versions. There's the original 1944 Russell Tandy, and then there's 2 nappy versions, one from 1962 and then one from 1970 where he updated it. Yeah,
I have the Tandy here.
Ooh,
and this is the one. She's in the red dress. She's holding a candle. She's in the attic. She's opening the trunk. And then you can see just behind her is the wardrobe with the little skeleton man peeking out at her. And then sheets of music kind of scattered all over the floor.
Is that the Applewood version?
That's the Applewood, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's Tandy's art.
Yeah, wow. Okay, I love that.
And then the second nappy version that I have, and then you have this cover as well,
yeah,
is more the vignette style where we just see like somebody's shadow in the background with the trunk and a skeleton hand kind of over the scene, and then Nancy in the foreground with she's holding a candle.
And the 1962 Rudy Nappy version I looked up. It's pretty much, it's set up exactly the same way that the Tandy cover is. It's just... it's a kind of different like outfit, and Nancy looks different, obviously, but like the setting is mostly the same. He's just redrawn Tandy's version. But so I have to say the 1970 Nappy version is not my favorite cover.
No. Definitely my least favorite of the three, and compared to other books, it's not fantastic.
Well, so I mean, this is, I don't know. I'm not an artist, you guys. I'm not an artist, but so Nappy usually does like the kind of like 3 different focal points in a lot of his covers that make kind of like the triangle thing. This one seems really off center. And I don't know if that was just like maybe like a publishing kind of issue, like maybe whatever, reference they used from his art just got like put off center. But it's like literally like it's off center. Like there's like 2 inches over here on this side, and there's like what, a centimeter of space over on the other side. I'm like, you guys get it together. Like center Nancy on the book. It's not that difficult. Like I like the colors of it. And of course, Nancy's face is always iconic. Nappy does a really great job. And honestly, I think every cover artist does a really great job capturing Nancy's like shocked expression. But yeah, overall, I think it's just not. It's also got a lot of blank space on it. It's just not my favorite. But yeah,
I do like her
definitely. Outfit's always on point. The 60s and 70s outfits.
Actually, in all 3. I love all 3 of the outfits.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Tandy's, the 1930s and 40s outfits, always so good. So good. So smart and beautiful. And yeah, and Nancy's in classic blue, I think, in all of them except... No, she's in red, isn't she?
She's in red in the first 2, and then the last one, she's in this kind of like teal bluish color.
So... Classic colors for Nancy. Yeah. Love it.
I do have to remark how closely the pilot of the CW show captured this image at the very end of that episode. If you remember, where she's in the attic, she's wearing the red pajamas, and she goes over to, she opens the trunk, there's the dress in the trunk, and then she starts peeling off the wallpaper, and behind that is not music, but it's that children's kind of sing-songy lyrics behind the wallpaper.
The nursery rhyme.
And so I thought that was a really good reference to not only the wallpaper in the book, but also just like opening the trunk, finding the dress there.
Yeah. See, that's the thing, is that this kind of stuff that happens in this book, like you're talking about, like opening the trunk, peeling the wallpaper, is so classic and tropey Nancy that it's almost hard to recognize the references to this kind of thing, because it's so ubiquitous. It's like it could be from any Nancy book or any Nancy, like, whatever, any Nancy story. So yeah.
Iconic.
Wow.
Love it.
I truly. Okay.
3 words.
Yes. So I think one of the words has to be spiders.
I have that thought as well. Yes, it has to be.
It's because there's so many spiders. And then either like songs or music. If we want to go with a alliteration, we should probably say songs.
Okay.
Spiders, songs. And then my last thought is like secret like spaces, because there's like so many, like there's some secret rooms, secret compartments, just like things in secret place, things that have been hidden. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
So I want to say like spider songs and secret spaces.
I like it.
In Secret in the Old Attic.
Okay, perfect. Easy.
Done.
Yes.
Done. All right.
I'm trying to think, is there anything else we want to say about it?
I feel like there is a lot more I want to say about it, but it's all very contextual stuff,
Okay. Well, let's just jump in then.
Okay. Do you want to start?
Okay, sure. The book starts, Carson is actually talking to Nancy about a case that he's got with a client right now, and he's going over this packet of letters that has been given to him by this client. Apparently, there is some sort of clue in the letters that will tell him or will tell us where some original music has disappeared to. But they are love letters, and Nancy actually uses this opportunity to tease Carson a little bit because he's like too embarrassed to read them. He's like, this is private. It should always like stay between the two people that were involved with the letters, right? So Nancy volunteers to read them for him because she's not too embarrassed.
Is this like a sexist thing? Is because I feel like Carson, he like assigns them to Nancy a little bit because he's like, well, because you're a girl, you're not going to be embarrassed to read them the way that I, a man, am. Yeah. Like, that's what it felt like to me. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It was a little bit that way. Yeah. I'm trying to remember if there was a difference in that in the original, but I don't remember.
Okay, maybe that's another remark that I have kind of off the bat about this whole book, not to derail us like 5 seconds into the summary here, but I do feel like this book was a little bit gender role-y specific.
Definitely.
I wouldn't call it sexist necessarily. Like, I don't think there was a whole lot of like discrimination, kind of prejudice stuff kind of happening, but I feel like it's very heteronormative.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about that later.
Yeah.
Also, there's a little bit of class stuff going on. Not like
for sure
class differences, but just like in how, I don't know. Yeah, there are class differences. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
Yes. Effie in particular, thinking about.
Yes. Yeah. And just.
Because Effie's in this book, by the way.
Yes, Effie's back.
Anyway, sorry.
Yes. Well, and the fact that she's like selling off this guy's stuff.
Yeah.
And
we got to talk about that.
Will. Okay.
We got to talk about that. I feel like I didn't hit that hard enough in the summary, so it's probably something we're going to have to talk about at the end.
Oh, no, we will.
It's just never really that important enough to mention, you know what I mean? And so...
It's really not, but it's jarring every time it happens. And Nancy's like, well, here's some more of your prized possessions I found for you to sell off. It's not up to you.
We'll talk about it, regular Drews. Don't worry. Yeah.
Okay. But Nancy is not embarrassed to read these letters, so she starts flipping through them, and she realizes that they are written by someone named Phipp to his wife, Connie. And that evening, Carson's client stops by to talk about what was in these letters. The client's name is Philip March, and he tells them that Phipp is his son, who is also named Philip, but Phipp was his nickname. He died when he was in the Army a few years ago. He was actually a really talented musician and a composer, and he created a lot of original works and was really proud of them, but never published them, so they are just kind of lost now. Before he died, his wife wrote to him and tried to get him to tell her where the songs were. And he told her that there was a clue in his letters, or that he was going to give her clues through this series of letters, but he died before he got the chance to like finish telling her where they were. So maybe there's some information in these letters, but from Nancy's first glance, there's really not anything here. But we also learned that soon after Phipp passed away, Connie also passed away. And their daughter, who is named Susan, she's about 6 years old. She is now living with Philip March, the grandfather. Philip is really elderly and he's kind of sickly and he's having trouble caring for Susan, especially financially. He's having trouble supporting her, but he's really against accepting any form of charity and like won't even accept, like, I think Nancy makes some coffee or something and he's like, oh no, I couldn't put you out or, you know, something like that. But he knows that because his son's music was like genuinely really good, he thinks that he can get them published and make some money off of that. And then he'll be able to pay for Susan's upbringing and everything. So Nancy promises that she is going to look more closely at the letters and see if she can analyze it a little bit further for some clues.
Oh, this is wild.
Yes. This actually did not happen in the original. So he's like stands up to leave, and as he's heading out the front door, somebody outside just chucks a rock at his head, and Mr. March gets knocked out, and the assailant just gets away.
Someone throws a rock at this man's head just as he's exiting a house.
Right.
What the heck?
So the doctor comes, they call a doctor for him, the doctor looks over him and he's like, okay, you've got a concussion, also you're super malnourished. So Nancy and Carson convince him to like stay overnight at their house so that he can kind of recover, and because I guess it's a long journey for him to get home, and then he'll be healthy again before he has to go back home. In the original, there's no rock, nobody throws anything at him. He's just so malnourished that he stands up too fast and he passes out from standing up so fast because he hasn't eaten in like 3 days or something like that. Yeah, it's really bad. So Nancy then like makes him some food, and they insist that like you need to stay and recover because you're trying to walk back to your house. It's like 20 miles from here. Not going to happen. Not on our watch. And then, he just kind of hangs out for a few days while he's recovering. Yeah, and we'll learn there is something else that happens actually at this spot in the original, but it ties more into the side plot. Okay. So maybe I'll keep it. But basically, it like Nancy doesn't see this happen, but we like flip the narration a little bit where it's like we see what's going on outside the house while Nancy, Carson, and Mr. March are inside. And it's the telegram delivery guy comes up to the house, and some random woman goes up and is like, oh, is that for Nancy Drew? I'm Nancy. I'll take that. And then takes the telegram. We don't know what it says. And then she scurries away. And then the telegram guy leaves thinking that he's given it to Nancy.
Wait a second. Is Ned being pursued by another woman who's jealous of Nancy? Is that what the plot is?
Pretty much.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I'm so excited.
Okay. So Mr. March is, and by the way, Susan is being kept by like Mr. March's neighbor or friend or something like that. Yeah. So Susan is fine, but she's not here with Mr. March. So while he's here, he's going to stay for like a couple more days at the Drew home. And while he's just kind of staying here recovering, Nancy is talking to him, trying to find out more about his life and more about his family. So we learn that his family used to be really well-to-do, and he has an extremely large but now kind of run-down home that is over 200 years old, and he remarks that he would like Nancy to come see it, especially because maybe there's more hints to where the music is at the home. At this point, Bess and George show up, and they start talking about an upcoming dance that's going on at Emerson University, which is, of course, where Ned is a student. Nancy talks to them for a little bit, and then she goes back to Mr. March's room where he is listening to the radio, and a song comes on, and he instantly recognizes the melody and says that that is one of his son's songs, and someone must have stolen it. Very interesting. So they listen to the radio pretty much the rest of the day, but the station doesn't ever like say what the song is or who it's by, and they don't play it again. But Nancy realizes that, okay, now we don't just have lost music on our hands, we also have theft or plagiarism going on here as well. So she starts wondering, hey, if there was theft involved here, could that person be the one who threw the rock at Mr. March? So after a few days, he is well enough to go home now. So Nancy, Bess, and George all drive him home. And this is when they get a tour of this absolutely massive, creepy home. The original is egregious in terms of how many slurs we use in such a short span of time.
Great.
I counted at least 3 in like a single chapter. It was crazy. Because, of course, we have a home that was built pre-Civil War. And so, of course, there are what they call their servant quarters on the property.
Read slave quarters.
They call them slave quarters in the original. And so Bess is like standing there waxing poetic about how these enslaved people, she could just imagine them hundreds of years ago, like running around and baby feet running around the floor and old ladies in the corner in the rocking chair. And she can just imagine how quaint it must have been with this going on. And she uses so many slurs in, like, she doesn't say little children. She calls them names. Yeah. And so it's like really shocking the way that they describe that. But eventually, you know, we'll make our way around the property and we get the whole tour. There are some servant quarters off the main house, but there is also this like absolutely massive manor, which is where they're living. And as I said, it's like really unkempt because he cannot afford to have like a gardener come out or a housekeeper or anything like that. And the place is now pretty much deserted because it's just Mr. March and Susan living there.
Well, I don't know if this is an original text, revised text difference or something, but Susan isn't actually They're not super clear about it, but he says that she's been in the care of, his like friend or neighbor or whatever. But I think he in the revised text he makes it seem like she's been there for a while, like she's been caring for her for a while, and she's just caring for Susan like out of the goodness of her heart, basically.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But she's not going to be able to do it for any longer because she's like moving or something. She can't take Susan with her, obviously. So
I think that is how they portray it in the revised. I want to say the original, it's just that he asked her to keep Susan while he was going to Carson's because he knew it was going to be a multiple day journey, because of course back then it was like you had to walk or get the train, I think, and so it was going to take him quite a while to get there, see Carson, and come back. And the lady wasn't moving in the original. She just was like ready to give Susan back as soon as Mr. March got back, basically. So they didn't make like a whole big deal about the neighbor in the original. She was just kind of there, and then Susan comes back. So but yeah, so the house is pretty much deserted now, and it's like super empty as well because of his financial issues. Mr. March has had to basically like sell off all of his furniture, and he remarks how like he had to sell off all of his dishes and china and everything because he needed the money more than he needed the dishes and everything. So what he does have left is pretty like worn and threadbare and very like plain, basic, cheap furniture now, when it used to be this like super extravagant home, basically. But then Mr. March leads them up into the attic, and so they start looking around up there. It's pretty cluttered with just like, old attic junk, but they are just kind of looking around. They don't really see anything yet because they have to go back downstairs because there's a pounding at the front door. Or actually, Nancy, Bess, and George stay up in the attic for a little while to keep looking around, but Mr. March goes downstairs to answer it. But then, while he's downstairs, they hear a cry and saying, "Come quick, come quick." And so, Nancy does make a remark at this point about how some of the valuables in the attic, Mr. March could like just easily sell these off, and how he must not realize that he has these valuable tables or whatever up here, because he could sell them off and then use that money to, on groceries or whatever expenses that they have right now. And she does that a lot throughout the book. She'll just be like, oh, look at this thing that I'm going to go sell for him, and not consider that like this is his wife's wedding dress. Maybe he doesn't want to sell it, and like, stuff like that. But anyway, so Mr. Marx yells, "Come quick, come quick." And so they all come downstairs, and they find that the neighbor, the friend, whoever had Susan, she's brought Susan back, and Susan has measles. Yes. And so she can't stay with the friend any longer because the friend is moving away tomorrow. And so Nancy, Bess, and George offer to stay to help take care of Susan. This is also a small change from the original. I think they really just cut this for time. Actually, Susan wasn't just brought back. She ran away. Or there was this chapter like, when it's come quick, it's the neighbor downstairs like, Susan's gone. I can't find her anywhere. Oh, no. And so it's like this really long to-do of like, oh my gosh, what if the worst happened? Susan. What if she was kidnapped? What if she was killed? Like all these awful things. Oh, God. And so eventually they just find her. She's in the barn. She had run away to come back to look for Grandpa, and he obviously wasn't home because he wasn't back yet. And so she just ran into the barn and fell asleep there, and then Nancy finds her. And so it's like a lot of time. I can see why they cut it, because really ultimately nothing happens, and it was like 2 or 3 chapters of that. But yeah, so they find her and they bring her in, but she still has the measles. So they have to.
So she ran away and she
she still has the measles. Yes.
Too funny.
Yeah, and so Mr. March makes a comment about how like he really can't afford like a nurse, like a children's nanny type of nurse to take care of Susan. So Nancy, Bess, and George offer to stay and help take care of Susan. And then Nancy also has the idea that, hey, you need a housekeeper. I know a great housekeeper. And of course, we remember Hannah's niece, Effie, also works as like a housekeeper, cook type of thing. So she tells Mr. March, hey, I know how you could get a housekeeper. Why don't you just sell off all your belongings from the attic, and then you'll have enough money to be able to afford to pay me for my services and also Effie for her services.
Well, she doesn't say she's going to be paid, but Effie, definitely.
I feel like she implied it at some point. Maybe I'm misremembering that. But yeah, he says something about like, I can't afford to pay you for your services. And she's like, oh, well, I have an idea. And also, let me call Effie because you can use this money to pay her as well.
This is what I'm talking about with like the gender role heteronormative stuff, because it's like, I understand that, Mr. March is elderly and probably he could benefit from someone taking care of him as well. But it's like, you can't take care of Susan yourself. You can't cook dinner yourself. Like, it just seems to me that like, if you are really so like skint, like you really don't have the funds to be able to feed yourself, which they don't really talk that much about that in the revised text version. So I think that's probably more of like an original text thing. But if that's really the case, they just don't talk about it. So it's very possible that it's the case in the revised text. Then it's like, you're definitely not going to be hiring a housekeeper.
Right.
Like regardless, like you're going to do it yourself. Like, it's just wild. But
and I know we talk about him being like weak because he's malnourished at the beginning, but there are things, and maybe he is less like physically fit than I'm thinking. And of course, everybody has their own needs and everything, but he does like do a lot of physical things in this book. Like he can bust down doors, he can get into fist fights with people. Like if he can do that, I feel like he can put his own granddaughter to bed, make her a sandwich. Exactly. Yeah. Like he's not exempt from caring for the granddaughter just because he's a man, and it does feel like that's the reason that like Nancy has to put her to bed. I don't know
how to do it because yeah.
I don't know.
And like that's probably true that he doesn't know because he is a man, but it just seems like if you've been this broke for this long, surely at this point you've developed some skills to be able to look after yourself in some capacity, and so you should be able to somehow look after Susan. And it's not like Nancy and Bess and George are doing all that much. They're just kind of sitting up with her and making sure that like she's not so feverish to the point where like she's got to go to the hospital. Like that's all they're really doing. So yeah,
we hit really hard on the like Nancy is a caregiver. Nancy is so good with children. Nancy has to be the one to read her a bedtime story, put her to bed, comfort her when she's scared of the dark, all this kind of stuff. She is really playing nanny in this book.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
It's interesting.
But yeah, so Effie comes over and she agrees to stay. And of course, if you remember, Effie is a little bit of a fraidy cat. So she is very afraid of this house. She does not want to stay here overnight. But eventually she does agree to do so because Nancy's going to be here with her, I guess. But Nancy, Bess, and George kind of take turns staying up with Susan all night. And then the next morning they're all exhausted because they've been up all night. So they go home. And when they get home, Nancy gets a call from Effie, who is frightened. She's frightened and tells Nancy to come back right away. So Nancy does. And she just starts telling her that she saw a large man creeping away from the house in the middle of the night, which is legitimately scary. Terrifying. Yes. Yeah. And Nancy tries to like calm her down a little bit, and they go around, check all the windows and doors and everything, make sure everything's locked. Nothing appears to have been broken into. And so this reassures Effie a little bit, but Nancy decides that she is going to investigate a little bit more on her own here. And she does find footprints that kind of circle the house and then head toward those old servant quarters. And so Nancy wonders, maybe this guy has a key, or maybe he got in somehow. Somehow he's getting in and out of this house without being detected. And then she wonders if maybe this is how somebody could have stolen and or plagiarized Phipp's music.
Right. So Nancy decides that she's going to go then search the attic again, and she finds more valuables to sell. But like as she's searching, a tree falls on the house, which like interrupts her search and terrifies everyone. Everybody's okay though. It didn't hit anyone, and it seems like the damage was minimal. It was just really loud and scary. Effie, of course, is super spooked by this too. So she asks Nancy to stay that night at the house again, and so Nancy does. But like that night, late at night, like after dark, Nancy decides that this is going to be a great time to search the attic again once everyone's gone to bed because she's crazy. Also, I think at this point it's like storming outside and her flashlight batteries are dead, so she's having to search the attic by candlelight, which is just like, can we not wait like 8 hours until it's daylight again for you to search the attic. I don't understand, but nothing's going to keep Nancy from the mystery, I guess. So
I don't know. I kind of love it that she's so eager.
Oh,
she just like can't wait. It's just eating her up. You can't sleep. You just have to know it's in the attic.
I love it too.
Yeah.
And it's definitely very like Nancy. Like, of course she can't wait, but it's like any other reasonable, sane person whose flashlight batteries are dead are going to be like, I guess I'm going to come back tomorrow.
Not the most practical. No.
No. So she's up there in the attic working by candlelight, and then she keeps hearing these like weird creaks. And so she's like worried that someone is like in the room with her because the candlelight is very dim. So she cannot see very far at all. And it sounds like someone is in the attic with her. Horrifying. She like convinces herself that she's just being silly, that it's just an old house, and so it's just creaking, you know. But then she goes to like open a cabinet to search it, and as she pulls the door open, a skeletal hand reaches toward her throat. So she screams like involuntarily, which like, yeah, who wouldn't? It turns out it's just this model skeleton that's like been rigged inside this cabinet to like come out at whoever opens the door.
It actually does not say model anywhere. I checked so closely, and I've looked into this. I'm pretty sure it's a real skeleton in both versions of the book.
No.
I dug into when model skeletons were even invented.
Kori!
It was... It was not until like 5 years after the revised was published.
So this is just like a fully reticulated like human skeleton.
Yes. Because it was very common back in certainly the 40s for a medical student to have a cadaver assigned to them, and that is their cadaver all throughout medical school. And you get your skeleton out of that, and then that's what you learn from while you're a medical student. And of course, they did have like plastic things that were invented later, but it really was around this time and would not have been popularized enough to where it's like a common thing where everybody uses a plastic one. No. It still would have been real, most likely, the revised as well. Yeah, I stopped and I reread it like 10 times to see if anywhere in there it said plastic or fake or resin, anything like that. Nowhere does it say model. I am like 99.9% sure that this is a real human skeleton.
Oh my gosh. I know you guys can't see this, but I just mouthed an expletive because...
Yeah.
Oh my God. Real human skeleton touches Nancy.
Yeah. So I could see why Effie was freaking out a little bit, honestly.
Well, yeah, no wonder.
Yeah.
Okay, so real life human skeleton comes out of the cabinet, touches Nancy, and she screams.
Oh my gosh.
So her screams end up alerting Effie and Mr. Marsh downstairs, and they come upstairs and they tell Nancy, like, okay, Nancy, maybe it's time for bed. Like, maybe we need to come back to the attic a little bit later. So the next morning, Nancy decides that she is going to go back to her house and talk to Carson. And when she gets there, he's like comparing these two different scarves under a microscope and explains to Nancy that he has another case. So here is our second mystery here in the book. He tells Nancy that a client of his believes that another company has stolen their design and process for making scarves. Apparently, this is so funny, some guy named Bushy Trot, who worked for his client, might have been a spy. And so he asks Nancy if she knows about this company that's suspected of using the stolen process. I don't actually know what that company is called. I don't think they ever give it a name, but Nancy
just call it the Dike Company or something.
Yeah, she does happen to know the daughter of the owner, who is Diane Dite. She went to school with Nancy, but they were not friends. And Nancy makes some very specific remarks about how Diane was basically just like uppity and like vain and you know, frivolous, and so Nancy would not associate with her usually, you know. But so Carson tasks Nancy with using her connection to Diane to see if she can get into her father's factory and either look for this bushy trot guy or try to observe their scarf making process for him. And so Nancy ends up making this really weird, tenuous, like, connection with Diane via her dressmaker. I guess Diane's dressmaker explains to Nancy, who happens to visit her, that Diane has been waiting for a dress to be ready, but it's not ready yet. And Diane is actually out of town, but she's coming back into town that afternoon. It doesn't matter. Nancy ends up going to meet Diane at the train station as she's coming back into town to convey this message from her dressmaker that the dress is not ready yet, and also that Diane's father needs to see her. So at the train station, despite Diane being super weirded out that Nancy is like there and talking to her, because again, they have like never associated before, Nancy manages to get Diane into her car and drive her to her father's factory, which is like clutch, Nancy.
This is such a good scene.
It really is.
Yeah.
She's smooth. Nancy is a smooth operator.
Yeah, she's orchestrating a lot.
Yes. So she brings Diane to the factory, and she tells Diane that she'll wait for her while she speaks to her father in his office. But while Diane is gone, Nancy ends up smooth-talking the secretary as well and gets the secretary to give her a tour of the factory. Basically, she plays off that like she is a closer friend to Diane than like she actually is. And so the secretary thinks that because she's Diane's friend, it's totally fine to give her a tour. It's very smooth. It's lovely. So on this tour of the factory, Nancy notices a door that says "Danger, keep out." And so she wonders if Bushy Trot could be back there. Luckily, the secretary has to return to her desk for a phone call and just leaves Nancy in the factory. And so Nancy decides to fake being ill outside of the keep out door. And when she does, a bushy-haired man that matches Bushy Trot's description pops his head out. And so he ends up helping Nancy like up because she thinks she screams and pretends to faint or something. And he goes to get her some water. And then when he gets back, Diane's father is with him. And he starts to call him Trot, but then he stops when he sees Nancy. Like, he doesn't say his name when he sees Nancy there. And then he ends up escorting Nancy out of the building. And then Nancy takes Diane home. So
I don't know why I love this scene so much. I thought it was so funny.
Mm-hmm. Well, Nancy's not even supposed to be there. Right. Even the secretary, like, the fact that she's able to go to the train station, convince Diane to get into the car with her, and like they're like loose acquaintances at best. Diane does get into the car with her. She's able to take Diane to the factory, not to her home, to the factory, get into the factory, convince the secretary to get her back into the tour, not only convince the secretary to get her back to take the tour of the factory, then convinces the secretary that it's okay to leave her back there while she goes take some phone call, then pretends to be sick, right? And someone comes out to help her. Like, what kind of mastermind level Tetris thinking is this? Because whoa.
So good. I think I just have to read the little part right there. She says, "I must get in there," Nancy thought with determination. In a moment, she smiled herself. "I think I know how to do it." Pressing her lips close to the crack of the door to the secret room, Nancy screamed. I have the perfect idea. I love this so much. I don't know. I feel like we talk about a lot, not just us, but just like the Nancy Drew community as a whole talks about how Nancy's often underestimated, especially by like, you know, adult men. It's not just like, oh, she's a detective. No, she's a little girl playing detective dress up, and we don't take her seriously because of that. Right. And we don't really ever hear how, like, what Nancy thinks of that or how it affects her. But this is so funny to me because you can tell that, like, she knows exactly what they think of her.
Taking advantage of it.
She knows how to use it against them and is like, okay, they just think of me as a damsel in distress, so I'm going to give them damsel in distress. I'm just going to scream, and then everybody's going to come running, and they're going to do exactly what I want. I thought it was so clever. I thought it was so funny. Yeah, I just love this scene.
I do also want to point out, too, that as impressive and wonderful as this is white girl privilege.
Of course, yes.
At its finest, like, and she's totally taking advantage of that. Of course, she's doing it for a good reason, but I just think it's important to point out that women of color can't get away with that kind of thing. No. And that, like, you know, people who are not a very specific type of woman probably can't operate in the same way.
Right.
Yeah. So, safely.
Definitely.
Yes.
Anyway, sorry, that was a long tangent, but.
No, it's such a fun scene. And it's so lovely to see Nancy's, like, it's because the way that it plays out in the book, it's like we don't get, and this happens a lot in Nancy Drew books, we don't get, like, what's actually happening inside Nancy's head. Like, Nancy is just making moves in silence like a real gangster, you know what I mean? So we don't get that, but you can so clearly see that, like, she had this plan, like, from the beginning. And, like, the way that she carries it out is so smooth and smart. So, yeah, it's fantastic.
Yes.
Anyway, so she takes Diane home, and then she ends up going back to her house and relaying the whole story to Carson. And then she goes back to Mr. March's home. And just as she revives, oh my gosh, I can't talk today. Just as she arrives to Mr. March's home, he is listening to the radio again and recognizes another song, a different song on the radio as being Phipp's song. And Nancy actually recognizes this too because it's such a popular song and, like, everybody loves it. And she knows that the name of it is called Song of the Wind. And so she ends up going to a music store to, like, buy the composition, and sees on the sheet music that it is written by someone named Ben Banks. So she decides to try to track that guy down. And then after all of this, like, errands that she's done to do this, she comes back to the March home again, and she hears Effie scream.
So Nancy runs upstairs to the attic, and it turns out Effie was bitten by a spider. And Nancy's actually, like, I can't remember exactly what wording that they use in this, but Nancy's annoyed by Effie a lot in this book, and she just, like, does not have the patience, and she's like, Effie starts saying that the skeleton bit her, and she's like, Effie, be real, be serious, like, come on, I don't have time for this. But then they take her downstairs, and they see that her arm is swelling up like crazy, and so they're like, oh, okay. And it turns out, they get a doctor to come, and it turns out that it was a black widow that bit her on the arm. I guess she was, like, trying to grab something. Oh, she said she was, like, she went upstairs to find some extra sheets or something. Yeah. And in reaching into the cabinet where the skeleton was, that's when the spider bit her. So they give her some anti-venom, but the doctor remarks how it's kind of weird because black widows aren't native to the area. So Hannah comes over because, of course, now Effie is unable to work. So Hannah comes over to, like, try to help Nancy with some of the housework, and they go to try to find the Black Widow, and it takes them a little while, but they do kill it. And so now Hannah feels good about leaving Nancy and Effie here now that the Black Widow is not gonna bite anybody again. That evening, Nancy decides that she is going to write a letter to the publisher of the Song of the Wind to see if she can get more information about Ben Banks. And I think this is hilarious as well because it definitely shows the time period it was written in, that you can just sit down and write a letter like, hello, I would like the home address of Sabrina Carpenter, please. Like, that's crazy. Like, you can just write to a music publisher and just get the contact information of anybody you feel like. But yes, anyway, Mr. March tells her that the music is actually based in part off of songs that his wife had written. So apparently Phipp's mom was a composer as well and would, like, sing him these songs or play him these songs growing up, and then Phipp used those songs to, like, inspire his own work, or his work, like, expanded off of his mom's work or something like that. And Nancy's like, oh, okay, well, where are your wife's songs then? And he's like, oh, I don't know, probably the attic, right? Yeah, so no surprise.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. Does not know where that is either. So that evening, we're back in the attic searching again, and she finds more valuable things. This time it's some, like, bejeweled shoe buckles and a little bit of sheet music. Very exciting. I think it's actually just one song this time, or just one sheet of music. But then as she's, like, looking through the trunk in the attic, her flashlight like rolls away from her and turns
she
off.
like sits it down. Yeah, and it rolls. Yeah.
Or like the battery dies in it or something like that. Anyway, the flashlight goes out. And as she's like feeling around on the ground for it, she starts to hear harp-like music being played. And so she like freezes still and tries to listen closer, but then the music stops. And then she is like so certain that she can hear footsteps and some like strange like rapping sounds. And then she hears Mr. March calling for her downstairs. And she go downstairs and is like, I think somebody's in the attic. Like somebody's up there right now. I just heard them moving around upstairs. And
Gotta be.
yeah, oh my gosh. And so Mr. March goes up and they both look around and they can't find anybody. But then they look at that sheet music that Nancy found, and he identifies this as one of his wife's songs, and that this was one that Phipp based one of his songs off of. And so this is good news, because if Phipp used this as the basis for one of his songs, we could possibly use this as evidence that he did write the song that's on the radio right now.
Right.
A few days later, Effie is well enough to come back to work, and Nancy, who had been filling in this whole time she'd been staying at the March house, she goes back to her own home, and she sees Carson there, who tells her that he is going to go to Mr. Booker's factory, who's his client with the silk making process. He is going to go over to the factory for a tour, so he invites Nancy to come along with him. He hasn't really made any progress on the case, but he thinks it might help to see what the actual fabric making process is like. So she also wants to see what this process is, so that just in case she can get back into the dye factory, she can kind of compare the two processes to see if there's anything similar between the two of them. Mr. Booker shows them around his factory and shows them his secret process for making gossamer silk or whatever. It's spiders. He explains how he's able to get his silk like so light and flowy. It's because it's not weaved by humans. He has spiders do it for him.
Yeah, or weavers.
Yeah.
Kori, did you know that this is a legitimate silk making like process, is using spiders to spin silk for silk? Like you make textiles based on. I only learned that when I read this book. I mean, maybe I knew it like sometime in my past when I was like really young or something, but I swear I looked at something, I was like, no way. But then I Googled, I was like, spiders, silk make, it's legit. It's real. That's so wild. Anyway.
I knew it was like possible. I just didn't know that it was like done, like a common thing that's still done kind of thing. But oh yeah. So yeah, he has these spiders like weave the silk for him, and then he puts that through this like chemical process and turns it into fabric.
Crazy.
So we get that whole educational chapter there, and then we leave the factory, and Nancy realizes that she has a great idea for getting into the dye factory, and then she drops off Carson and she heads over to Diane's home. She goes in and she tells Diane, like, hey, I know this little girl. She doesn't have very many clothes. I know that you have a little sister. Would your mom happen to have any, like, hand-me-downs that she's trying to get rid of? Maybe anything that, like, your sister's outgrown, because Susan's, like, just a little bit smaller than your sister. So Diane, like, goes to talk to her mom about the clothes or whatever, and Nancy starts looking around their living room, and she sees that they have this, like, really nice collection of antique bottles. And so Diane comes back with the clothes and she gives them to Nancy, and she explains that that's her mom's bottles. She collects these antiques. And Nancy's like, hey, where have I seen really cool fancy bottles before? Mr. March's attic. So Nancy decides that she is going to go take these clothes to Mr. March, and she gives them to him, and he's like, no charity. And she's like, oh, well, I know how you could repay Mrs. Dite for the clothes, your fancy bottles. And so he gives Nancy the bottles, and then Nancy takes the bottles to the Dite factory, where she's like, oh, hi, Mr. Dite, I thought your wife might like these bottles. And she gives one as like a gift, but then the rest of them, she's like asking him if he wants to buy them or not. So as she's talking to him about the bottles, and she gives him the one as the gift, and then she's like, they're kind of talking about the prices for the rest of them. And as she's talking about this, she notices out the window Bushy Trot walking down the aisle, walking down the alley. I love
just
that
have to
name.
say, I know Bushy Trot is the best like villain name. Bushy Trot.
Bushy Trot.
Like it's like it seems like a Scooby Doo like level name. So
Right?
good, so funny. Anyway,
very memorable for sure. Yeah. So she leaves the bottles with Mr. Dite and she like runs out into the alley to see where Bushy Trot is going. He ends up going into this like side door of the factory and Nancy follows him, obviously, and she finds that there's like a bunch of chemical vats in there. And the smell is like the exact same smell that she remembers from Mr. Booker's factory. So she's like, okay, that's pretty unique and recognizable. It seems like it's probably the same thing. So she actually has like a little mini bottle in her pocket. So she uses that to like take a sample of the chemical so that she can take it back to Carson and have them analyze it to compare it. And as she's looking around, she notices a black widow right by her shoulder. So she kills the spider and everything's fine. It doesn't bite her or anything like that. But then she finds this like secret door in the wall of this factory that leads her into like another like inner factory or inner laboratory like inside this lab with the spiders. And inside of that, it's like basically this like room of spiders. And it's just like all these cases with just like black widows, just hundreds of black widows in this room. So
horrifying. I'm like crying just thinking about it. You know that scene in like every single Spider-Man movie where Peter Parker goes into the laboratory and that's where he ends up getting bitten by the spiders, but there's like millions of spiders like in their webs in there. That's what I'm picturing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
My favorite one in the Andrew Garfield movie where he goes in there and he just like plucks the spider web or whatever because it's like some special kind of webbing or something, and then the spiders just fall on him and he just tries to shake them off.
Gross. Anyway. So, from all this, it seems like Mr. Dite is using the exact same process as Mr. Booker, just instead of orb spiders or orb weavers, he's using black widows.
Which, like, doesn't make any sense. Can we talk about that? Why the heck would you use not just a poisonous spider, but like maybe one of the world's most notorious poisonous spiders to make silk in your factory? One, the orb weaver spiders actually make sense because they produce webs like crazy. Like that's the whole thing. So of course they would use those because they produce a lot of silk. Also, not dangerous. Not dangerous.
Right.
Black widow spider, like you would have to go in there and get the silk. So that means that you are opening yourself up to such a liability anytime anybody who's working there is trying to get the silk. That is insane. That is insane.
Ugh. Gross.
Anyway. So Nancy, after some close calls with Bushy Trot, like almost catching her in this factory, Nancy manages to escape and then get home with the samples that she's taken, and she gives them to Carson. Meanwhile, we kind of shift perspectives to Effie, who is at Mr. March's house, and she is freaking out as per usual. But this time it's because Nancy had promised her that she would like be back that evening to stay there. But of course she's been delayed by basically getting trapped in the factory. So she's not there yet. Eventually Effie just decides to go to bed. But later, I guess she's not quite in bed yet, or she wakes back up or something. She looks out the window in her room and she sees a figure creeping along the hedge near the house. So she freaks out even more. She like hides under the covers, sweet Effie, because she's so terrified. And then when she looks back out the window, the figure is gone. So she just like tries to fall asleep, telling herself that she's locked all the doors and the windows. Like there's no way that anybody could get inside right now. Like she's safe. But eventually she starts to hear like noises and like creaks outside of her door. Effie! It's so scary.
This is legitimately terrifying.
Yes. Effie, in like a moment of like the bravest bravery we've ever seen Effie exhibit, she gets up out of bed and opens the door, only to find Mr. March So she's super relieved that, it's just him out there and, it's like, oh, okay, I'm just, it's not an intruder, it's just Mr. March. I can go back to bed. She does. But then we, as the reader, soon realize, though, that Mr. March is actually up because he heard noises too.
Yeah.
So, ruh-roh.
We need to talk about this scene with the version from the original to the revised, because they do tweak this a little bit, and I have to say this is probably my favorite part of the book just because of how suspenseful it is. It's so good. Okay. Sorry, anyway.
No. So Mr. March ends up looking around the house to try to find any intruders, and he doesn't see anyone. Eventually, though, Nancy actually arrives, and he greets her, and they both go to bed. The next day, Nancy goes back home again and finds a letter from the music producer that she had written to about Ben Banks. They won't give out any information about him, which is probably good. Probably shouldn't be given, the phone number and address of your, the people you work with. Mm-hmm. But they don't say why that they won't do that. So Nancy decides that she is going to write back and try to get an appointment to see them in person to ask them about it. She sends that note, and then she arranges with Bess and George to give Effie the night off from work. And as she's running errands and going grocery shopping, she stops by the music store and buys sheet music for all of the Ben Banks songs that they have. And the clerk says that there are only three Ben Banks songs, and that they were all published very close together. Interesting. Later that evening, when Nancy is telling Susan a bedtime story, she sees a shadowy figure moving around outside the house. So she ends up sneaking outside to try to catch him, but he seems to have disappeared. So Nancy is worried that he's gotten into the house somehow, so she tells Bess and George to stay on alert at the front and the back doors of the house while she and Mr. March go upstairs to the attic. And then once they're in the attic, she starts hearing those creaks and the same harp sound that she heard before when she was up here earlier. But unfortunately, Susan ends up getting freaked out because everybody's gone or something, and she knows that they're up there on the attic. And so she calls for them, and this startles or alerts the intruder, any potential intruder, to their presence in the attic. And so they try to trick him into thinking that they're not in the attic, but it doesn't really work. And then a few minutes later, Bess and George shout because they see the intruder fleeing the property. They try to chase after him. But he ends up getting away in a nearby car. And Bess and George say that they couldn't get a good look at him, but they did see that he carried a rolled up piece of paper under his arm.
Oh, no.
More stolen music.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Later, they're all listening to the radio to try to calm down after all the excitement, and Mr. March hears another one of Phipp's songs, but this time, the announcer says that the song is by someone named Harry Hall. So that's interesting. And I do want to talk about this later, too. The next day, Nancy, Bess, and George do a search around the house and in the attic, looking for however this intruder managed to get up into the attic, right? They aren't having much luck at this, though, and Bess ends up getting tangled up in the skeleton and kind of freaks out, which is
yeah.
Valid now that I know it's a real skeleton.
Right.
Gross. And she talks about how creepy the skeleton is and how it seems like it's beckoning them into the wardrobe. And this remark makes Nancy go, you're kind of right, Bess. It does look like that. And so she takes a closer look at this cabinet, and it turns out there is a secret compartment on the floor of it, but it's stuck. And just as they are trying to force it open, Effie, who's back from her evening off, comes upstairs to tell them that someone named Mr. Jenner is here to see Nancy, and this is the publisher of Ben Banks' music.
Woo! So we go downstairs to meet Mr. Jenner, and he is not very nice at all. He says over and over again that we have wasted his time in coming here. Why come out here at all? He had to come in person. Why not write the letter back? Basically, he tells Nancy that from her letter, he knows that she's implying something to do with plagiarism or theft or something like that. So he wanted to come in person to ask her what was up with that.
Even though she definitely didn't. She really didn't say anything about it.
She literally is just I'm interested in more information. Can we talk? And so she plays it really cool and doesn't really give him any information about, she doesn't like accuse plagiarism, anything like that. She just wants to know. And he ends up telling Nancy that both Ben Banks and Harry Hill send their compositions into him by mail. But he is like so confident that they are upstanding guys that would never plagiarize. So
of course.
He can prove that it wasn't plagiarism and those are his songs and she has no right to ask, and then he leaves. So, not the nicest interaction, but then Nancy goes back up to the attic afterwards and they are able to get that secret compartment open. And inside, they find a sheet of music. It says, by Fit March.
Woo!
Perfect. So, Mr. March is so happy about this that he asks Nancy to play it for him on the piano, which she does. They all think that it's a great song. They all agree that it's like an instant hit or whatever, and that it's definitely going to make some money for Mr. March. And so Nancy tells Mr. March that she has, like, Carson has like a friend who's a music publisher or something like that. So she's going to get that guy to like, does. Yes.
Carson's innumerable friends.
Oh, yeah, so she's going to ask Carson to, like, talk to his friend and get it published for him, basically. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Carson does know everybody, doesn't he?
He knows everyone. He always has some random dude who happens to know stuff about whatever thing they need to have information for. Or someone lives somewhere, can help Nancy whenever she's visiting. Like,
right?
Just...
Carson always has a guy for that.
My associate, my friend who I know from years ago, he'll come out and he'll help you, Nancy. He'll give you his car. You can use his car. You can stay at the hotel, the club that he's a member of. You can call him. He happens to be a Navy pilot, and he can give you information. He can give you a tour of how boats work. Like,
right?
Just,
like, okay. The people you meet in law school, I guess. Who knows?
I guess.
So at this point, Nancy decides that it's time to bite the bullet and go back to the Dite factory because she did leave that bottle or that box of bottles from Mr. March with Mr. Dite, and she never got the money for him. And of course, she kind of needs to do that. So she is really worried that he is going to be mad at her for having broken into his factory, or that he's at least going to be suspicious of the fact that she had disappeared for so long and that just she didn't come back that day. But she decides that it's more suspicious to just never come back for the bottles, so it's time to just go get this done, right? Luckily, though, she's able to talk her way out of this pretty quickly. He's like, okay, so did you get all the information that you came here for, or what? Like, was it worth it for you to break in? And she's like, oh, what do you mean? I like saw somebody out the window in the parking lot that I thought that I knew. So I had to run out and say hi. And by the time I was done talking to them, it was like late. So I didn't want to keep you late. So I just decided to go home. And yeah, it's totally cool. And he's like, well, you just went home. Are you sure? And she's like, oh, well, I confess that sometimes I stay out late. I went to Bess's first and then I went home.
It's a really weird scene. And honestly, it confused me a little bit. There definitely seemed to be some subtext in there that I wasn't understanding. And I think Nancy is like playing something up about like her being like this like flighty teen girl or whatever. And so he's like buying that. And yeah,
it may they didn't change this conversation from the original to the revised, and they changed the whole like break-in thing that she did from the original to the revised.
Okay.
And in the original, she did not get home until really, really late, and Carson and Hannah were like kind of freaking out because nobody knew where she was. And so I don't remember if he knew specifically, but like people in town knew that Nancy was missing and that she didn't get home until like after midnight. And so I feel like maybe they just forgot to cut it, that like he had this knowledge that like, oh, you didn't get home until really late, but you say you went straight home after here. And then that's when she's just kind of like, oh, yeah, I admit that I stopped at another place first and I went to hang out with some friends and then I went home.
This is maybe like a scandalous take and it may be totally wrong, but I did have the brief thought when I was reading it. I was like, is she trying to say that she was with a boy?
That would be interesting.
Because it was like, can we look at that scene?
Yeah.
Let's see. Chapter 14. So, with sinking heart, Nancy realized she must play her part convincingly if she expected to keep out of trouble. Your sudden disappearance from Mr. Dight's office the other day disturbed him very much, Miss Jones continued. Nancy pretended not to understand. My disappearance? Why, didn't Mr. Dight think that when I left his office I was going home? Apparently he didn't. He thought you went off somewhere in the factory. Well, no wonder you were concerned. And then she goes to get Mr. Dight. Okay, and so then she's talking to Mr. Dight. He says, well, did you learn the secret you were sent here for? Nancy knew that Mr. Dight suspected she had been assigned by someone, perhaps her father, to spy on him, but she pretended otherwise. Oh, you mean about the bottles? She said brightly. I'm sorry I ran off the way I did, but I saw someone in the courtyard I thought I knew. Then it was so late I decided to go on home. Lawrence Dight gazed quizzically at Nancy. And did you go directly from here? He questioned sharply. Nancy was not to be trapped so easily. Well, you know how it is, she laughed. I didn't mean to worry anyone, but I stopped to see some friends. I'll confess, I didn't get home until rather late. Our housekeeper was quite upset. I can imagine, replied Mr. Dight. And that's like it. Because then he just says that, you know, he believed her. He seemed to believe her. Yeah.
I mean, I just read it that, like, yeah, Hannah was freaking out because she legitimately was freaking out that Nancy wasn't home yet, and maybe she was just referencing that. But if you hadn't read the original, you wouldn't know that. So I could definitely see how, to somebody who hadn't read the original, that just kind of stands out as like a Nancy's out and about late at night, getting up to no good. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it was just the way that, like, did you go directly home from here? He questioned sharply. And then, I can imagine, replied Mr. Dight. So it just seemed like he was, like, assuming something about her character that I was like, what is this about? I was really confused. But, yeah. I just thought it was maybe just, like, clunky, like a clunky writing moment or something, and that it wasn't. Well, obviously, it doesn't matter, but.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting.
No, it definitely was clunky. I don't know. Yeah. He's real, like, stern with her, and then she convinces him, and then, like, poof, it's fine now. And he's just like, oh, yeah, anyway, here's your bottles back, or whatever.
Well, I definitely like that characterization of him, because I think it makes a lot of sense when you think about how probably his experience with girls like Nancy is just purely from his daughter, Diane. Right. And so the differences between Diane and Nancy, you can definitely see in like that dynamic in the way that she talks to Mr. Dight and the way that he talks to Nancy and the way Nancy talks to Carson. Like, you can see, I don't know, how she kind of maneuvers him. She maneuvers Dight, and she sometimes maneuvers Carson, but it's more of like there's more of a frankness between them, where the wool is totally pulled over Mr. Dight's eyes. So it's just interesting. Anyway.
But yeah, she is able to kind of convince him that she went home or whatever, and she gets the bottles back. And then she just goes back home. She ends up selling the bottles to an antique dealer in town. He doesn't end up buying them, but she does get the money, and she takes it over to Mr. March. But then she goes back home, and she sees a new letter from Mr. Jenner has arrived. And he is threatening to sue her for libel if she continues to claim that he's been plagiarizing these songs. And she knows that these are just threats and that he's probably just panicking here. But even so, Nancy kind of needs some proof if she's going to be able to fight this, if she needs to do so. So that evening, Nancy, Bess, and George come up with a little plan to try to catch this intruder at the March home. So they get dressed up in all black, and they kind of post themselves in kind of just like spots around the lawn outside of the house, just to see if they can see anybody snooping around at night.
I love this.
It was a cute little scene.
So much.
Yes.
This would be such a great moment in like a TV show or a game. Like, okay, Nancy, I'm going to hide behind the tree. And just like... It's so funny. Anyway.
So around 11, Nancy starts to hear some strange noises, as expected, and she realizes that she's hearing the sounds of actually two separate sets of footsteps, and that two shadowy figures are approaching the house. Unfortunately, though, one of the shadowy figures turns out to just be Mr. March. I guess he got scared or maybe bored because he has just been hanging out inside this whole time, and he just came out to check on the girls to like, he just goes outside and is like, hey, Nancy, did you find anyone yet? And is like yelling across the lawn. And so, of course, she sees the other figure. When he starts talking, the other figure like darts away. So they decide like, okay, well, you know, he wasn't able to get into the house tonight, so maybe he'll be back to steal another night or something. So maybe we haven't completely lost our chance to catch him. But that's pretty much all they do that night because he's not coming back tonight. So they just decide to go back to bed. The next morning, they're listening to another one of Phipp's songs in the radio. And this time, Nancy kind of pinpoints something from the lyrics that is familiar to her. She recognizes the wording in the lyrics as being the same wording as in Phipp's love letters to his wife, Connie. And so she's like, oh, well, obviously we need to read the love letters again, but they are at the Drew home, not at the March home. So we'll have to go back to Nancy's house later to read through them. But before she can do this, Susan decides, or she's like about to leave to go home, but then before she can go, Susan decides that it's time to play dress up with Nancy. And so she convinces Nancy to stay, and they play dress up together, and they're like running around the house, and Susan's like in this long dress, and because she's in this long dress, she like trips while going down the stairs. And as she trips and falls, she's carrying a parasol or whatever. It like snags the wallpaper on her way down and ends up ripping a hole in it. And Susan's fine, but when they like go to look at the hole, Nancy's like, oh, how are we going to fix this? And she sees behind the wallpaper are music notes painted on the actual wall. And so, oh my gosh, this could be the proof that Nancy needs to prove that Phipp is the real author of this music. So they call Mr. March over to look at this, and they end up tearing like all of the wallpaper off of this entire wall. And it turns out to be this like, I guess it's painted directly like onto the wall itself. And it's like a portrait of the family. And then in the picture is like a stand with sheet music on it. And then on the sheet music is painted one of Phipp's actual works.
Well, I think it's older than that. I don't think it's Phipp's song. I think it's like an old family song.
The one that he was like inspired from.
Right. One of the one he was inspired by it and expanded on it. So, yeah.
So I guess for whatever reason, Nancy knows that this is enough to show that Phipp is the author of this music. So it's just more proof for them.
Yeah.
So Nancy decides she needs to try to talk to Mr. Jenner again, the publisher, because he may, you know, realize this and be more willing to like settle outside of court rather than having to go through a whole court case and everything.
Right.
So Nancy, Bess, and George drive out to his office in a neighboring town. And of course, he refuses to see them. But they kind of like sneak around outside his office and overhear him talking to Ben Banks. And he's telling Ben Banks that they're in a really tight spot because of Nancy, and he's worried that she may have found proof against them. So that's very telling. And they decide to kind of like just hang around and wait until the end of the day and then follow Ben Banks as he's leaving the office that night. And so they do. And Nancy is kind of like looking at him, and she's like, he doesn't look like he could be the shadowy figure that we've seen outside the March home. It just doesn't look like they're the same build. So they end up following him all the way to a hotel, and they go to talk to the desk clerk, and they're like, oh, because, you know, that guy that just came in, and Nancy tries to like, you know, be clever about asking for his name. And then the desk clerk is like, oh, you mean Mr. Dite?
Yeah. So we learned from the clerk that this guy's name, his full name is Horace Dite. And so Nancy's like, well, he must be related to the Dite family that we know of in connection to the scarf case that Carson is working on. So Nancy goes home to talk to Carson. And she actually learns from Carson that he's heard back about the samples that Nancy got from the factory and that they match exactly the chemicals that Carson's client uses in his silk making process. So Carson thinks he now has a case. But she asked him about this Horace Dite fellow, and Carson realizes that this is like Lawrence Dite, this Diane's dad, his like second cousin or something. And so this could impact Carson's case, right? Because now that Horace Dite knows from Mr. Jenner that Nancy is investigating him, news could get back to Lawrence Dite about this, and that could make Lawrence Dite think that Nancy did actually break into the factory, whatever. It could complicate Carson's case, right? So Carson decides that Nancy should stay elsewhere for her safety, which is very interesting. So she ends up collecting Phipps's love letters and all her stuff, and she goes to go stay with Mr. March. Also, this is the first time in the revised text that we learn that the property that Mr. March owns, his family house and everything, is called Pleasant Hedges.
I think they say it at the very, very beginning when they first arrive with Bess and George.
I feel like I never, because I was always struggling when I was writing that down. I was like, Mr. March's home, what am I going to call it? They go back to that house, but it's called Pleasant Hedges. If it wasn't at the very beginning, I don't know that they do.
Yeah, on page 14.
Okay.
Beyond the Pine Grove, turn here, it's called Pleasant Hedges.
Just kidding. I'm not a close enough reader.
No, it's okay.
Notice. But yeah, so she's going back to stay at Mr. March's for now. Also, Carson heard back from his publisher friend, and he loved Phipp's song so much that Nancy sent to him, and he wants to publish it. So he's also asked for more songs. He said, if there are any more songs like that, I will publish them.
Yay!
So this is really good news. So once Nancy gets back to Pleasant Hedges, she tells Mr. March that she wants to search for more songs. So she looks more closely at Phipps's letters, and then one of them makes reference to a long-forgotten man. And so Nancy thinks that this refers to the skeleton in the attic. This really confused me because I was like, didn't you already find the song Under the Skeleton in the attic? But I guess there was another letter that was a reference to that or something instead, and this is another reference, whatever. Nancy goes back to look at the skeleton, and she ends up finding a hole in the back of the cabinet behind it. And so she takes like I don't remember what she's like a long wooden dowel or something to like poke through the hole, and it doesn't hit anything. So she thinks there's some kind of secret room or secret space or something behind this wardrobe.
I love it.
I know. So she and Mr. March end up moving the wardrobe to the side. It's really heavy and large or whatever. But yeah, he can't be so sickly as to not be able to move a really large piece of furniture.
Right.
You know what I mean? Anyway, yeah, so they move it and they find this like crudely constructed door with a peephole in it behind it. And so the peephole is the little hole that Nancy found. So it's stuck, though. It won't budge. They try everything they can to open it. It doesn't open. So Nancy and Mr. March end up having to like launch themselves at the door to break it down. This does get the door to open, but unfortunately they both fall down like a small set of stairs into the room, but they're okay, I guess. This is crazy to me because if Mr. March really is that old and he takes a fall, like that could have been a lot more serious. He's like not even winded. Like they're fine. Like
can't make a sandwich, but he can do this.
Yes.
And they keep calling him, or he keeps referring to himself as the old soldier. And he's like, I'm an old soldier. I can do this. And like, I can handle this. Because I guess he fought in World War I, right? And so he keeps like talking about how he's still athletic enough to be able to do all these things because of his time in the military. So,
but can't make a sandwich.
Can't make a sandwich.
Got it. Okay, so they get into this secret room. And in here, there is nothing but a skylight, a table, and then this antique piano desk. I tried to look up what exactly a piano desk is. I mean, like, I assume it's a really small piano. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I couldn't find anything, like, in reference to it. Because I wanted to kind of know what it looked like.
I think it really is just, like, the stand-up pianos. Just because, I mean, grand pianos would have been the standard back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I Googled it as well, and all I could come up with is, like, the piano your parents had.
Yeah, like an upright
those,
piano. Yeah.
Just kind of got some wooden pieces to it. Not like a keyboard, but slightly bigger. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking of, this is going to bring out this is going to reveal the inner geek in me. But, you know, in Sense and Sensibility, the piano that the Colonel gives to Marianne.
It's been so long since I've seen it. Yeah.
Don't worry if you don't know this reference. I watch this movie probably like once a month or something. I love Alan Rickman. Anyway, yeah, it's like a very small piano. It like doesn't have like a top to it or anything. It literally looks like a writing desk, but it has a piano in it. So I assume it's that. But the reason why I wanted to look it up is because Nancy basically, like, Nancy's like, well, there's nothing in the room.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas, like, even if it was like an upright piano, you would definitely want to look inside of it to see the keys or if there's anything in there. But Nancy doesn't even think to do that. Anyway.
The way they describe it, it made me picture like a really tiny, like a child's piano, like the little Charlie Brown one that he plays, you know, that size.
Yeah, that's so funny. But even Charlie Brown's piano had a spot for where the keys go. You know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah.
Or I guess it's Linus's piano. But like, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But so they're looking around this room. The only other access point to the room seems to be the skylight. And so Mr. March thinks that must be how the intruder is getting in. Nancy is not so sure, though, because in order to like access the skylight from the outside, you would need like a ladder. And so she's sure that like she would have noticed a ladder, but they never did. But so then she does look at the piano desk more closely, and she thinks that there must be like a secret compartment in it somehow. This is the thing I don't understand. It's like, yeah, there's a compartment, but it's not secret. It's where the keys are. Like,
right.
It's a piano. Anyway, but so she says there's a space or something like above the keys or below the keys, and she thought that like maybe there's like a secret drawer in there or something. And so she presses a few of the keys, and she realizes the sound of the keys makes that harp-like noise that she had heard, I guess because the piano is so old and like out of tune, it's very faint or something. And so it doesn't sound like a usual piano. It sounds kind of much lighter and more like a harp. And also, you know, remember she heard that rapping noise. So she thinks that like maybe if she plays some keys and knocks on the piano or something, a secret drawer will open. They do that for a while, and then eventually, that is exactly what happens. A drawer slides open on the piano.
I will say in the original, Nancy finds in Mr. March's house, a book on piano desks that like talks about secret compartment. It doesn't say like how to open it, but it talks about how there are secret compartments and kind of how they're made. So that felt very game to me, that like you would have to go first find the book that tells you about it. It doesn't give you the answer, but it gives you more information, and then you go try the puzzle. That felt very, very game.
Yeah,
to me.
That does.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah.
I just thought it didn't make much sense because it was like, well, there must be a secret spot in it, and it's like, it's a piano.
Yeah.
Anyway, made me so annoyed. But yeah, so she finds a secret drawer, and it slides open, but it is empty. Except there is like a note that they find in it that must have been dropped by whoever stole what was in here. Like there must have been music in here before, because the note says, Riggin, can't you find another good song? D. So Nancy's sure that the D has to stand for Dite, obviously, right? But then who is Riggin, you know? Anyway, they decide to board up the skylight just in case. And then they go down to dinner. And afterwards, Mr. March decides that this time he's going to lay in wait for the intruders outside this time. Nancy is concerned about this, but Mr. March won't be dissuaded and won't let Nancy help him either. So instead, while he's outside, Nancy decides to go upstairs and search again because she thinks the piano might have a second hidden drawer.
Of course. At least two, right?
Well, it does. That's the most annoying thing about all of this is like Nancy finds a secret drawer. She finds one secret drawer. She's like, you know what? I bet there's a second one. And she's right. Like, how does that happen? Like, I don't know why it annoys me so much.
I think she reasons it like, oh, well, he keeps coming back to look for more, and there's literally nowhere else in this room for something to be hidden. So, like, he must think that there's something else here, so she just has to check, you know?
It just annoys me so much because it's like, do a thorough search the first time, Nancy.
Yeah.
Find all of the secret compartments the first time, Nancy. Like, I don't understand how immediately, right off the bat, you are taking a tour of this guy's home. You find this attic with just so much stuff in it. How your first step isn't to immediately catalog every single thing that's in that attic.
Right?
I don't understand. I don't get it. Somebody explain it to me. Maybe this is just like the autistic person in me. I don't know what it is, but it's like, it doesn't make any sense. Be methodical. Like, you have all this stuff. You can't just go around randomly opening trunks and just hoping that you found everything. Like, come on, you're Nancy Drew. This is mystery story number 21. 21. You're telling me that after all of these mysteries of finding secret compartments probably in every single mystery story, you're not looking around at all of the trunks that are in the attic, all of the floor that's on the attic, the walls, the rafter. You're not telling yourself, we better go over this attic with a fine-tooth comb and, like, find where all this, like, it's clearly,
well, no, she doesn't learn her lesson because she's going to do it how many times after this as well.
You're right. It's a trope for a reason. I gotta let it go. It just, it's not how I would do it. Okay.
No. It is a lot of back and forth.
Anyway, she finds the secret drawer, the second secret drawer in the piano, and inside she finds lots and lots, like a bundle of unpublished songs, all written by Phipps. So it seems like finally, like, we found the stash. Unfortunately, though, as she's reading these pages, Nancy doesn't realize that a man has come in through a secret trap door under this piano. And when she finally does realize, it is too late because he grabs her. She recognizes him as Bushy Trot, and she like exclaims like, "Bushy Trot," or something. So funny. And he says, "It's Riggin Trot, if you please."
Okay. Yes. There we go.
So we now realize that note was between him and Dite, Riggin and Lawrence Dite, or not Lawrence Dite, Horace Dite.
Yes. And
he then ties Nancy up and gags her. And basically, like, is really snarky and, like, thanks her for doing his job for him and finding all of the music, because he takes that, right? And tells Nancy that he's sorry to leave her, but this little creature will fix you so that you'll remember nothing of this episode. And then he opens a little bottle and dumps out a black widow spider on the desk. So Nancy is tied up in this attic with just this free roaming black widow spider.
I don't know why they changed it, but in the original it was a tarantula.
Yeah. We should talk about this.
Yeah.
We should talk about this after, because there's interesting things about this. Anyway, so he ends up locking the door to the room, so the door into the attic, he locks that, and he's going to go back out in the trapdoor that he came in, and he blows out the candle, so leaving Nancy in total darkness. So she's tied up, gagged, in the dark, unable to see, can't see where the black widow spider is anymore. And he's gone now. Bushy Trot has left. Oh, and he also tells her as he's leaving that Mr. March is, quote unquote, sleeping outside and won't be able to come to her rescue. So now we're worried about Mr. March too. Because what did Bushy Trot do to him? And so Nancy is, like, terrified. She doesn't know where the spider is. She doesn't want to move because, like, what if the spider is, like, right there? But she decides she's got no other choice. She tries to roll towards the door and tries to, like, get up to get it open, but she can't. And so she starts, like, hitting the ground, like, with her heels. Like, her ankles are tied together, but she, lifts up her feet and bangs her heels onto the ground to try to alert someone to the fact that she's trapped up here. Hopefully Effie, right? Luckily soon she does hear someone start to call her name, and then she hears people run up to the attic, and they end up busting down the door to the secret room, and it is Ned! Yay! Along with Bess, George, and Effie. I guess apparently Ned just, like, happened to be in town, and Bess and George took him out here to see Nancy. Anyway, Nancy tells them all about what's happened and that Mr. March might be injured, so they rush outside and find him unconscious, but alive under a bush. They take him inside and they're able to revive him, but he ends up going straight to bed, which, you guys, again, we've said this before on this podcast, don't go to bed when you have a concussion.
Yeah.
Don't do that. At least not before seeing, a doctor about it. So, but anyway, he's okay. But Nancy doesn't have any time to lose now, right? Because Riggin Bushy Trot is getting away with all of Phipp's songs. So they go outside to like get in the car and drive to Mr. Deitz to try to get Trot's address to like try to catch him at his house. Luckily, Carson ends up driving up here at the last moment or something, and they end up all going together, which is really random. I don't know why this was a necessary part of it, but he happens to be there. But they do drop off Bess and George at home first because it's like too late for them. Just like, what?
We don't have any time. We can't even make sure Mr. March is okay, but we can stop at Bess and George's houses first.
You want to take the last chapter here?
Oh, sure. So at first when they get to Mr. Deitz' house, he's really mad that he's been woken up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Of course. But then Carson starts explaining what Bushy Trot has been up to and how he just tried to kill Nancy, basically, and tells him that, hey, we have proof that, like, your silk process was stolen from Mr. Booker, whoever Carson's client is. And Mr. Deitz is flabbergasted. He is totally surprised to hear this. He says that he had no idea it was a stolen process. He knew Bushy Trot had worked at Mr. Booker's before, and he'd come to him with very high references. So he hired him and he showed him this great process, but had no idea that it was just from Mr. Booker's plant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he said that he like bought it from Bushy, and so like he's super surprised.
I don't buy this at all. No. A likely story, just pleading ignorance. Okay.
Right. Well, and he says that the only reason that he had like made an effort to keep it a secret at his own factory is because he didn't want the public to know that they were using Black Widows because they would be afraid or something.
Well, I think he was even keeping it a secret from his other employees. Like, he just didn't want news to get out about it. Yeah.
He didn't want his, like, other staff to know that there were spiders in the building.
Like, yeah.
I'd want to know.
Yeah.
If I was working somewhere with thousands of Black Widows just loose in a thing.
And thinking, too, about the fact that, like, Black Widows aren't native to this area. So, like, this factory has brought in God knows how many Black Widow spiders to the... Imagine if some got out. And, like, now you have this invasive species. Like, a very dangerous invasive species in River Heights. That would be a freaking scandal. Like, that would be pretty serious.
Way to go, Mr. Deitz. You're making things great for everybody. Yeah, so it turns out, as you said earlier, using the Black Widows is not necessary at all. There are other spiders that aren't dangerous at all that you could use for this process. It's just that Bushy Trot is just obsessed with spiders and is like a sociopath who just loves to have poisonous spiders on him at all times.
Cool.
Doesn't he say that he like keeps one on him in case of emergencies or something like that? Crazy man.
So scary.
Sinister. Okay. So Mr. Deitz ends up calling the police on Bushy Trot, and then Carson, Nancy, and Ned all go over in Carson's car to Bushy Trot's house, and then the police show up, they identify him, and they all watch him get arrested and carted away. Then the next day, they get the whole story. So it turns out Trot is an ex-con that he apparently knew Phipp from the army or something like that. And Phipp had like talked about his music when they knew each other back then. And so he'd always planned on like coming back and robbing him after they'd gotten out of the service.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yikes.
And then after prison, he ended up going to work as Horace Deitz's chauffeur, who is the like Ben Banks guy, right? And then he learned that Horace Deitz wanted to write and sell music, but was never like good enough at it. And so he was like, oh, hey, I know where we can get some good music. Why don't I steal it? And then you pretend to be somebody else and you sell it, and we'll kind of like work together or whatever on this. And then, of course, he was able to steal a few of them, but then kept getting interrupted every time he went in to search for more music. So this is when he drilled a hole in the side of the wall of the secret room and through the back of the cabinet and then fed the Black Widow through it. So that's how Effie got bitten at the start of the story. And then once Horace and Bushy were making a lot of money together with the stolen songs, they decided to get into the stolen silk business as well and get Lawrence Dite to make it for them. So now both Horace Dite and Bushy Trott will go to prison. We don't really care to check up on Mr. March at all. We just kind of like very briefly get this like, yeah, and he's healthy now. He's fine and he'll be good now that he's got the money.
And also, he's super grateful, Nancy.
Yeah.
Why did we not have life?
Right.
I think that's what they say.
Yeah, because him and Susan like are so grateful to her or whatever, but we never go back and talk to them again, even though like he could have literally died from what Bushy Trott tipped to him. But then anyway, we flash back to Nancy's bedroom. She's with Bess and George talking about the upcoming dance at Emerson. And she says, oh, look what Mr. Booker, Carson's client, gave me as kind of a thanks for solving the mystery for him. And she pulls out a very beautiful light silk dress that's, of course, made with the spider thing or whatever. It's this beautiful yellow dress that she'd seen on her factory tour or whatever with Mr. Booker. And he'd given her the dress to wear to the dance.
Of course.
The end.
The end. Okay. So I feel like there are a couple of loose ends here. Not a lot at the end, but a couple. Because I don't think we ever talked about the fact that Harry Hall was also, I am assuming it was just another name, another pseudonym for
Horace.
Ben Banks, right? Dite. For Horace Dite.
They do explain in the original that it's both. He uses both pseudonyms.
Right.
It's supposed to be the same guy.
But the thing about that, though, that confuses me is that if that's the case, if it is just another pseudonym for Horace, then Jenner should know that, like, because clearly he meets at least Ben Banks in person. And so what he said to Nancy about them just sending their sheet music in through the mail was a lie. And so then he should be arrested, too.
I feel like he was more in on it than he was willing to admit, that he definitely knew more.
Yeah, well, he was defensive and jumpy, and like Nancy hadn't even mentioned plagiarism when he's like, well, they sent it to me through the mail, and I have proof that it's not plagiarized. And Nancy's like, okay, like, no, I didn't say that, you did, you know? So I definitely think he must have been in on it. But it's strange to me that, like, at the end of a Nancy Drew book, not all of the criminals would be brought to justice, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a bit of a slip, at least on the revised text. So yeah.
We'll fix that in the game. We'll make him one of those suspects as well and make him go to prison at the end of the game too.
Perfect.
Yeah, we'll fix it. It'll be okay.
And then another one, what was it? Oh, shoot. I forgot about it. I just thought about it and then I forgot. I can't. No, it's gone. It's gone.
It's okay.
It's gone. There is another loose end somewhere. Something that doesn't get explained. I can't remember what it is. Shoot. But yeah, it's out of my brain. Oh well, maybe I'll remember it later.
Yes.
But yeah, so I feel like that's pretty good. Pretty good for a mystery story. Only a couple things I feel like I didn't understand. I guess only one, since I can't remember the other one. But yeah. Other than that, the ending did just kind of bug me a little bit, in that I thought it's our typical like explained like solution. Oh, that was it. Who hit Mr. March in the head? I assume it's Bushy Trott.
Yeah,
but like he doesn't confess to that. We don't get any explanation for that. And and why? Like, why would he do that?
I thought that they did explain that for some reason.
Let me check. Maybe it's just like a throwaway line or something, but
I feel like it really was just a very brief.
Okay. Well, it says Trott was convinced that the music must be hidden somewhere in the piano desk. As he continued to search, he became alarmed, thinking that he might be caught because Nancy and her friends came with increasing frequency to the attic. But like, that's after he got hit in the head. You know? I just thought, like, why on earth would... I mean, I know that, like a lot of Nancy Drew mystery stories, they just make the villain out to be just, like, generally, mean, bad, and evil with no real motivation. Yeah. Although I thought, in general, Bushy Trott's motivation was pretty good in this. It was just money. It was just motivated by greed, which makes sense. But, yeah, except for the weird weird obsession with like
spiders.
Black Widow spiders and, you know, having dangerous spiders on him. But then also the fact that he just apparently must have gone out of nowhere and just brained Mr. March. Oh, where?
I found it. 160. Definitely, he produced 2 pieces of rope from his pocket. Always carry these for emergencies, he announced with a low chuckle. Use them for people who don't mind their own business.
Okay.
I threw a stone at Old Man March at your house just to scare you from coming here, but I'm glad you came.
Okay, yeah, so it's when he ties Nancy up and
Yes.
and gets Nancy in the attic. Well, what a bad motive. So you did it to scare Nancy away.
But you don't
Like,
even know she's taken the case yet. It could just be Carson.
Also, how does he know who Nancy is?
Nah.
I guess everybody does. So see, it's just that. So that's a little bit not super well explained to me. But other than that, I feel like it's a pretty solid mystery.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. But the end in general just bugs me a little bit because it's that narrative, like long form, like explanation where it's not even really Bushy Trot giving the confession. It's kind of like an explanation of his confession, which is
I feel like they say like Carson learned it from the police or whatever and is just relaying it, and it's like, okay,
I just feel like that's just lazy, sloppy writing, but it's typical of the mystery stories, and so I'm not too peeved about that. What peeves me the most about it is that the dress part feels super sexist to me, or gender rolly to me. I don't know, and more so than I usual like with the mystery stories. I feel like, and I don't know. It's just, I don't know. Nancy has spent the entire book like looking out for like the welfare of this family or something, and then like the ending to it is like well, what? How is Nancy gonna get paid back, right, for doing all of this good stuff? It's like, oh, I know what she'll like, a dress.
Right.
Like, it just feels super shallow in like a way that like Nancy, I feel like, has not been in the book. Like, I feel like even though Nancy, yes, has been kind of playing the role of a caretaker, of a babysitter, whatever, for both Mr. March and Susan, but it's like, it comes from a place of like deep concern from her, right? Like, she's very worried about Mr. March being able to like be healthy, take care of himself, and provide for Susan. And even her weird selling off of his stuff in the attic was so that she could help provide that money to him so that he could take care of Susan. And that all came from nothing shallow about it. Like, she really wanted to help. And then it's like, oh, I got a dress for a dance. Woohoo.
Yeah.
It's like, really? Yeah. It's just, I just feel like it cheapens the whole thing. Like, it cheapens the whole story to have that be the ending.
Yeah.
And not just like, I mean, it would have been fine for her to get the dress or something. And like Nancy could look at it like as in being so beautiful. And she's sure that there was an occasion coming up soon where she could wear it. But she really was, the thing that she would think back about the most on is how happy she was to have, you know, helped, you know, Mr. March and Susan or something. Like, we could have ended it like that, and that would have been fine. But the fact that we end it and Nancy is like, isn't it beautiful? I'm going to wear it to a dance. Like, it's just like, like, the fact that we don't get any kind of, the resolution is the dress, and the resolution isn't her satisfaction of being able to help someone. You know, it's just
maybe it's
cheap.
Yeah. Maybe it's because the original focuses a lot more on the dance side of things, and and the original's a lot more sexist about that as well. But it almost fits, and maybe they should have just like found something else instead if they were going to take out the dance side plot.
Yeah.
And maybe it should have just been a scarf, you know, because we know Nancy loves her scarves. Or it could have been the piano desk. Like, she could have just got to keep the little piano thing.
Well, and like, even I don't mind the concept of her getting a dress or a scarf or whatever. I don't mind that. But like, the fact that we end it with the concept of the dance, and instead of just being like, it was so beautiful, it looked like one of the antiques in the attic, and Nancy couldn't wait to wear it and show Susan the next time she went to visit. Like, something like that proves that like Nancy's not really being shallow about it. She's using it as like a representation of, you know, beauty or like history or whatever, instead of just being it being now something that she can use to ornament herself for Ned, you know? It's just like, ugh.
Well, and Bess even, she says something like, oh, do you think your dad could find another case for me that's similar enough to where I get a free dress too?
Right.
Yeah. And so it's them like giggling amongst themselves about like, oh, I wish I had the free dress. And I wish I could be that pretty. And oh, Nancy, you're so great that like what you got out of this was beauty.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And not the fact that actually it was really important that she do this, and anybody who was in the same position probably would also want to try to help the Marches, you know? Like,
oh, well.
Yes. But overall, I liked it.
Good.
Overall, I thought it was a good story. I think it was very suspenseful. We talked a lot about, you know, all of the danger, scary situations, and I think there were a lot of them in this book.
Yeah.
And I think they were all very effective and really fun to read overall. Just a few little things.
Yeah.
Irritated me. Do you want to talk about the spiders?
Yes.
Okay, I have to point out, I did some research, a little bit of research on this, and black widows are not as deadly as like they're purported to be.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they are definitely dangerous and they can kill, but usually they only kill like, you know, small children or elderly people. Usually when, I think it's like, I looked this up. But it's like a small percentage of people who get bitten by Black Widow actually end up dying. And for the most part, even you don't necessarily need medical treatment.
Oh, okay. Huh.
When you get bitten by a Black Widow spider, only if like you see your symptoms get like much worse and not better, I think.
Right.
Don't take this as medical advice. Do your own research and go to the doctor if you need to. But from what I have seen on the internet, it's just really painful, and it can have just like really kind of scary seeming side effects, like blood pressure stuff and stuff like that. But really, you're probably not going to die if you get bitten by a Black Widow. And so the whole thing of like Nancy being trapped in an attic with one is like, yeah, scary to think about, but it's really more psychologically scary than it is actually life-threatening. Not that I think that it wasn't like effective in the book and that it didn't serve its purpose, because I do think that anybody in that situation would be terrified.
Of course, yeah.
Even just from the pain of it, because apparently the bites are very, very painful.
Right.
But yeah.
See, I should have looked this up. Are tarantulas the same way? I assume that tarantulas are the same way. If they bite you, it's not necessarily going to kill you, but it might hurt. You might swell up a little bit, but it's not.
Well, tarantulas themselves are not. They're not, I guess not poisonous, venomous.
Okay.
And so they can't, but their bites are very painful. Yes. So,
so either way, whether they changed it from tarantula or left it as Black Widow, it's going to be the same.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah. And I think tarantulas, at least wild tarantulas, I don't know, are a little bit more territorial and aggressive. Black widows are actually really shy, and they do not like to be around humans. They're actually quite scared of people, and so most of the time you're not going to be in danger of it coming to get you. It's going to be trying to get away from you.
Interesting.
Yeah. But a tarantula, if you're in its territory, and I've actually seen this in like backwoods in like Texas, they will, if you get too close to them, they'll kind of like try to like make themselves seem bigger.
Yeah. Puff themselves up a little bit.
It's really just a scare tactic, because they're trying to get away too. But if you get too close to them, they'll kind of freak out, and they will come at you a little bit, but not where you can't get away.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not going to chase you.
I can definitely see how it's scary, though, that you are blindfolded in the dark. Or maybe, no, she wasn't blindfolded, but she was tied up in the dark, can't see where it is, and could easily just like roll onto it by accident and get bit that way.
Right.
And then also not having the knowledge that, maybe it's not going to kill you. She's expecting that it will, Yeah. So I can see why that would be frightening.
Yeah, and certainly nobody wants to get bitten by a spider. Certainly not a Black Widow, you know?
If you've got the choice, obviously not. No, thank you, but...
It's definitely going to, like, incapacitate you for a little while, you know what I mean? But it's not... Yeah. So... And so when Effie got bit by it and like she started seeing like the effects like immediately and whatever, like I mean I think it's fine that she went to get anti-venom. I think that is something that people will generally do, but it's also like not necessary.
Okay.
Like you don't actually have to get the anti-venom and you'll probably be fine.
Good to know. Well, I still don't want to be bit either way.
No. Yeah. But
yeah.
Anyway. Okay, I do have to say that, so Carson's case with this whole silk making process thing and his client, Mr. Booker or whatever, the fact that he's like totally like reliant on Nancy to solve the mystery, I think is hilarious. Like he basically, with all of this, Nancy literally solved every single case for him. She solved the letter and the missing music for him, and she solved his entire other case. But I do have to say that the fact that she broke into the Diet Factory and collected those samples of chemicals, and that was the foundation for Carson's case, was those like samples and the evidence of that is being chemically, would never hold up in court. Never. Stolen samples from someone's factory. You had your teenage daughter break into a factory, steal the lawyer working on the case sent his teenage daughter in to steal from them and is going to use that as evidence against them in court. That is not admissible. I'm going to go ahead and it's not, there's no way.
What kind of game are you playing here, Nancy? Come on, Carson. You should know better.
Carson should know better.
Right?
Nancy probably doesn't, but Carson, the attorney,
should know better. Yeah.
Carson, who went to law school, Carson, who is a very successful practicing attorney, should know you can't use stolen evidence as evidence in court.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, that was funny to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about Effie.
Oh my gosh.
First of all, yes, I love Effie so much. But I do think it's really interesting to see her dynamic with Nancy in this, because Nancy very much treats her like a servant.
Oh, yeah.
And
she has no patience for her at all.
I know that she is, right? And I know that Effie is paid to do housekeeping work, right? I get it.
Isn't she like 14?
She was. Was she in the original text versions of things? I think she was. I don't know about the revised text, but yeah, she's young. But there's a certain level of like classism that Nancy, like Nancy treats Effie differently because she is a servant, and not just like, it's not just that she's ordering her around, which she does, but it's that it's a certain level of like expectation of like, oh, Effie will do it, you know, or like we'll get Effie, and it's just like assumed that like that's not going to be a problem because Effie is for hire. You know what I mean? Oh yeah. Like where she's like just like assuming, oh, I know this solution's so easy, I'll just hire Effie. Yeah. It just
not even asked if she's available or wants to do it. Just
yeah. Just I'll hire Effie.
Effie makes it clear she does not want to be there. And Nancy's like, get back to work.
Yeah, like, Effie, you're being silly. Like, don't worry, Effie. I, as the smarter, wiser, richer person, know better than you do. And really, it's not that dangerous. You're just being dramatic. Except, oh, yeah, I also think that you were right and someone was trying to break in, but I'm not going to tell you that. Like... Like the whole point where like Effie gets there and she's like freaked out because she saw a guy walking around outside of the house, and she tells Nancy, and Nancy is like, well, let's go check all the doors and windows. You locked everything, right? Well, then it's fine. And then Nancy's like, actually, I'm going to go around and look, and I do see footprints, so she was probably right, and I hope they weren't getting into the house.
But chooses to still gaslight Effie after seeing the footprints even.
Yes. She treats Effie like she's stupid and like a child. Because she's a quote-unquote servant. Like, yeah.
Oh. Poor Effie. I feel so bad for Effie in all of this. She does not, she makes it so clear she doesn't want to be there. She is more than happy to like help with Susan and cook, clean, and whatever, but gets dragged into searching the attic when she says she doesn't want to be, and then gets bit by a black widow in the process of that. And it's like, in so much pain. And she's like, now can I go home? And Nancy's like, you can have one night off, but you better be back tomorrow. Oh, poor Effie.
Yeah. And then Nancy, Bess, and George act like they're like doing her this big favor by giving her like this night off. Like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could give Effie a night off? And aren't we so magnanimous? And then and it's like, she's an employee. Yeah. She gets to have days off. Like, oh.
They tell her to go to the movies, and she's like, she needs some rest. She doesn't need to go to the movies. She needs rest after what you've put her through. Well, she's going to be back at work tomorrow.
Just the like, oh yeah, you can go to the movies and enjoy your time. It's like, because that's what they do is they go to the movies. It's like telling someone, like, it's like a rich person telling someone, well, you know, can't you just like, I don't know, go buy a new car? Like, you know, like it's like just the assumption that like, one, she can afford it, and two, that's like how she would spend her time or solve a problem or whatever, is just doing the thing that they would do, which is spend money.
Right.
You know?
Didn't Nancy drive her out there anyway? So she's kind of like stranded here as well.
Yeah, she doesn't have a car. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that until now. Jeez. Nancy.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great. Yeah, but so.
Oh, sorry, I just saw in my notes the fat joke with Bess. You'll have to jog my memory what it was. Something about cookies, or Bess and George make a joke about how Bess must wish she had cookies right now. They added that in.
Oh,
that wasn't in the original. They added the fat shaming in.
I don't think I made a note of it because I feel like at this point I'm like, I can't.
It was honestly very brief in this one, but there was one point where they just like, oh, side note, Bess is fat if you didn't know.
Right.
She likes sugar. And then it just goes back to the story. And it's like, okay, that was like out of nowhere.
Near the beginning, wasn't it?
I can't remember exactly what the context was of it at all. It's not even important because it was such a one-off. But
you know, pretty, slightly plump cousin.
I feel like there was something about a dessert or a cookie or something like that.
Well, her interaction at the very beginning with them is very brief, so I don't think it's there.
I think it's later. Maybe they're having dinner or something, and then Bess is just like overjoyed to have dessert or something like that.
I don't
but I'm like, you didn't take the time to specify that in the original. You had to like make the effort to put this in.
That's so effed up.
Anyway, like, okay, you removed the slurs, which I'm glad for, but then you have to go and do this to Bess. Thank you.
Well, and then they also changed the name of slave quarters to servants' quarters, right?
Right, yeah.
Because, of course, we got to pretend that slavery didn't exist.
Right.
And that Mr. March's family, by the way, must have owned slaves. And we're totally okay with that. And the fact that, now that he's poor, that's the problem. And
right.
not the problem that probably this whole building shouldn't exist because who knows what kind of horrors and atrocities occurred here. Like,
right.
Let's raise it, actually.
Okay, let's talk about the original.
Anyway,
actually, if you want me to run through the differences real quick.
Yes, please.
So again, it's pretty much the same main story. I think pretty much overall I've already mentioned the big differences, like Susan kind of running away, and then the rock thing not really happening in the original. But there is the whole side plot with the dance and with Ned.
Ooh.
So it starts out, and I might actually have to read it to you. It will make you so mad because it is the most sexist side plot that could possibly exist. So basically, Nancy, Bess, and George are all talking about how Bess and George are getting ready for the Emerson dance. And they're like, oh, blah, 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 what are you going to wear? How are you going to do your hair? All that kind of stuff. And Nancy's like, what are you guys talking about? And Bess and George are like, the dance coming up. Don't tell us Ned didn't invite you. And Nancy's like, what? I haven't heard about a new dance. I actually haven't even heard from Ned lately. What's going on? And in the original, George is going with Bert, her boyfriend, but it's Buck Rodman in the original. Not important at all. Buck Rodman's not even in the story, but I just thought that was interesting that we mentioned his name again, because I think Helen was his date in Nancy's mysterious letter to the football game, I want to say.
Oh.
We've heard the name Buck Rodman before, and we know that he's one of Ned's friends or whatever. But so he's mentioned. But then, so Bess and George are like super shocked that Ned has not invited Nancy to come with them or come with him to the dance. And then the phone rings. And another guy whose name is, actually his name is Horace Lally. So they changed the name. But Horace Lally calls, and he is one of Ned's classmates in Emerson. And right off the bat, Nancy talks about how he's very handsome, but she doesn't like him because he is like really full of himself. And so he's just like very off-putting to her. And so she's like, I wouldn't want to go to the dance with him, but he calls and invites her to the dance. And this is where it was pretty horrifying because he starts telling her, I won't take no for an answer, and I'm going to be calling you every single day until you agree to go with me and all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And so the whole, like, kind of, you know, just throughout the whole story, we have these kind of parts where we stop and we talk about the dance instead. And it's like, oh, well, and Nancy's like really conflicted the entire time because she tells Horace Lally no, and he won't accept no for an answer, but then she's still just like, I don't know what to do because I was kind of hoping Ned would call soon. So if maybe Ned calls me tomorrow, I'll just accept and be like, oh, well, I'm going to the dance with Ned, not with you. But then she starts to feel like she can't go to the dance at all, even though it's like, Nancy, you don't go to that school. Why would you go if you weren't invited to somebody's date? Like, it's so random. And then she's like, well, I don't know, like, it's going to be awkward for me to turn Horace down but then still show up at the dance as somebody else's date, and so that's going to be really strange. And it's a lot of like considering Horace's feelings and not wanting to embarrass Horace and all that kind of nonsense. And then Bess and George the whole time are like, where's Ned? Why is Ned not calling you? And then there's that thing with the telegram at the beginning where some other girl pretends to be Nancy and accepts Nancy's telegram. And then at some point, Horace starts talking about how there's going to be a big surprise at the dance and how he wasn't going to tell Nancy, but she really needs to come because there's going to be this big surprise there. He really needs her to see the surprise.
Is he trying to get one out on Ned by outing Ned as going with some other girl?
Actually, they don't confirm it. I feel like they sort of do that as a little bit. Because that's definitely what they start to hint at.
Yeah.
And so Nancy's like really curious now. She's like, well, maybe I should just go to the dance with this guy because, like, you know, I want to see what the surprise is. Yeah, what's going to happen at this dance? So eventually Horace calls Bess and George and is like, hey, I need you guys to convince Nancy to come to the dance with me.
Stop.
And both Bess and George are like, well, no, that's weird and creepy and gross. And why would we do that for you? And he's like, no, promise me you'll get Nancy to come. And so they're like, no, how about not? And so they go to Nancy and they're like, hey, just so you know, he's trying to convince us to convince you to come, but we think you should still go to the dance. But hold on, not with him, not like that. Just come as like our +1, and we'll just all three go together and go as a group of friends. Even though, ladies, none of you go to this school. Why would you go to the school without a date? And so she's like, okay, maybe I'll just go with Bess and George, kind of like as their third wheel, and you know, get to still see the surprise anyway or whatever. But then we find out, or in the process of Nancy like taking Diane back and forth to the factory or whatever, she sees Diane, like she drops Diane at home and Diane receives a letter and she sees who the sender is on the letter. And we as the reader don't hear who it is, but Nancy is horrified and like her heart drops and she goes home. Right. And then later on in the story, Bess and George call and they're like, this, you are not going to believe it. Ned asked Diane to the dance.
Stop!
And so Nancy is heartbroken. Nancy is heartbroken. She's like, why? She's like, well, I guess it's his right. Like, he's not legally obligated to take me to the dance. He's not morally obligated to take me. So I can't be upset that he asked another girl.
But so, he is morally obligated to take you.
Yeah, sorry.
Not legally, certainly. But morally, definitely.
So instead of Nancy like being upset that Ned didn't ask her or being mad that Ned asked somebody else, she gets really concerned because now she knows that like Diane's family is about to be exposed for stealing the Booker secret or whatever. Because we don't know that the Dites are also innocent yet. She thinks that the Dites are in on it. She is so concerned. She goes to Carson and is like, I don't want Ned's name attached to all this. And so he, you know how he like stops the case because he's worried that it'll like impact Nancy's March case or whatever. He's like, okay, we'll stop the prosecution just so that you can finish finding the music and then we'll go ahead with it. It's not for that reason. He stops it so that Ned does not get embarrassed over being attached to Diane's name. Whoa. And he's like, Nancy asks him that. He's like, I don't want Ned to be embarrassed. I don't want Ned to be publicly shamed for what the Dite family is being shamed for. So please don't go forward with the case. And then, and then there's also the part where Carson is like,
this is hot tea.
Right? It's so frustrating. Okay, so Horace this whole time has been calling Nancy and calling Nancy and calling Nancy, and she's just like avoiding the phone, even though every time she hopes it's Ned calling, she like just won't answer. She gets Hannah to answer for her, and then Hannah lies and it's like, oh, she's not home. And then there's the part kind of towards the end where Nancy like takes the love letters and goes to stay at the Marsh home because Carson's like, oh, you're not safe or whatever, right? No. He sends her because Horace has been calling so much that he's like, you just need to get out of the house. And then we have plausible deniability that you're not here and he needs to stop calling. Yeah. And so we learn that Horace Lowley is the nephew of Ben Banks's, I can't remember what his real name is in it. It's not Horace in this. They give him a different name. So Mr. Dite. The surprise was that he was going to perform at the school dance and Horace was going to perform with him or something like that. And so Horace does not know about the plagiarism at all. Horace is just like genuinely interested in music and has an uncle who's also a musician that he looks up to and thinks that his uncle is like this brilliant musician or whatever that's written all this stuff. So he's supposed to perform at the dance and he legitimately just wanted Nancy to like notice him and think that he's a talented musician. And that was the whole surprise. But then also he knew that his cousin Diane was going with Ned to the dance. So he also wanted to expose Ned to Nancy. Right. Yeah. So then at the end, Ned goes to Bess and George and is like, hey, do you know why Nancy has been not answering any of my telegrams? And they're like, what do you mean? You haven't called her? Like, she's been waiting for you to call. And he's like, no, I telegrammed and she never responded. But it turns out Diane intercepted the telegram and responded to Ned and was like, hey, my dad and I are going on vacation for the next few weeks. We won't be in town. Don't call me. And then Diane like went to Ned and was like, oh, hey, I heard your girlfriend's ignoring you. Don't you want to go out with me? Basically pulling a Deirdre. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And so at the end, when Nancy and Carson and Ned go to the Dite house and are talking to Lawrence Dite and are like, hey, we need Bushy Trot's address or whatever, Diane comes downstairs and assumes that they're there because they found out what she was up to. And she goes up to her dad and is like, I'm sorry, Dad, that I lied. Don't be mad at me. And Dad didn't know any of this. He turns around and he grounds Diane and is like, well, now that I know what you've been up to, you just admitted it out of nowhere.
You're not going to dance.
Yeah. And then Ned's standing there like, I can't believe you tried to distract me from Nancy and blah, blah, blah. But never apologizes to Nancy for taking another girl. Just apologizes that like he had thought that she was out of town and that's why he didn't call. It's like Nancy or Ned, nobody like, it's fine that you don't take Nancy, but nobody forced you to go find another date instead. Yeah. And you, like, nobody's questioning that.
Well, and also like the fact that it's like Diane Dite, like, who is like portrayed as being like this absolute, like, just like
snot,
awful, yes, like, you know,
snooty,
a bee witch, you know what I mean? Like, she is like choosing her, like. It's like, and it's not unusual. I mean, like when Nancy's unavailable, I feel like in other mystery stories, like we have seen some kind of similar plot sometimes play out where like if Nancy's not available, Ned will talk about taking like another girl to like an event or something. But that's usually because it's like, I don't know, some important event for him to go to and he has to have an escort because that's what's socially appropriate or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's not like he's choosing another girl not because he wants to, but like out of like necessity or whatever. But it's like,
And it was a different time. Like, it was a big deal to have a date to these sorts of events. Yeah. I can understand that.
Yeah, it was just so funny. What a cluster. Oh my gosh.
So that's the drama side plot. This boy that needs to learn what consent is, and Ned who needs to figure out what a girlfriend is.
I do think it's like hilarious though that like Nancy, who is like forever treating Ned like a doormat and like just like using him like and discarding him like a used tissue, is so offended and so upset the moment Ned is not available for like a 2-week period. Right. Like, I can't believe that you would not call me for 2 weeks. It's like, Nancy, girl, rod eye. Like, look in a mirror. Look in a mirror, honey. Like, oh my gosh.
She can do it, but it's unacceptable if he even thinks about it. Yes. So that's the side plot with that. And then the only other main difference that I would say between the original and the revised is that scene where Nancy breaks into the factory. And how, you know, how she had promised Effie that she would come back that night. And then while she's gone, Effie and Mr. March hear things in the house. And then she just does end up coming back that night. Well, she doesn't end up getting home that night in the original. So she does go into, it's all the same where she goes into the room, she sees the big vats of chemicals, and then she goes into the other interior room, sees the spider, or sees the tank of spiders and ends up killing one. Well, Bushy Trot actually follows her into that room, but she manages to like hide or something so he doesn't see her. And he like leaves this like, I think it's a gas canister or like somehow gases the room with like poisonous gas. Oh. And so she falls unconscious basically all night. And the only reason she does wake up is because it might be Bushy Trot. Somebody else like comes into the room to look again for her and like opens the door, doesn't see anything. So they close the door and it's enough fresh air to like let Nancy wake up again. But by this point it's been so long. And then this is where I'm saying the writing was so good, because it's not just what happens here that like, oh yeah, she was there for a longer amount of time. It's the writing, because then we're in Nancy's perspective.
Is terrified. Yeah.
Right. And then we switch to Effie and Mr. March, where it's the same scene where, you know, Effie is seeing the guy outside and then they hear something upstairs. And then, oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't know why that scene just gets to me so much, because at the same time that is going on, we also flash to Carson and Hannah who are freaking out. And Horace is calling this entire time that Nancy's gone too. And Hannah's like, I don't have time for this. She's like actually missing. I can't get her to the phone right now. I literally don't know where she is. So they're freaking out. And so because they've talked to Horace, like now Horace is telling everybody in town that Nancy's missing. And so like word is getting out that Nancy's gone. Yeah. And then it flashes back to Effie and Mr. March, who are still freaking out. And then the next like late at night or like early the next morning, Nancy finally gets out of there, makes it back home, and Carson and Hannah are overjoyed, obviously. And wow, just the whole scene is way more suspenseful than how it plays out in the revised, just because it's like extended so much longer. My goodness, it takes place over the entire evening. So anyway, sorry, I got really excited talking about that. It was such a good little scene where it's so scary.
And I mean, just like I'm so sad I missed out on the subplot, the Ned subplot, because that was like so entertaining to like hear you talk about it. I can only imagine what it would be like to read it. So I got to get my hands on one.
Oh, it's even more sexist. Like if you didn't like the dress part of this, the whole dance thing is just that exacerbated times a million. And then the dress is like the conclusion of all that.
Good grief.
But just like, okay, imagine you're at this old house that doesn't even have electricity. There's no phone. And it's like a gated home. Not like a gated community, like rich. Like you're so rich, the home itself is gated. You're on this property that's super sprawling.
You don't have a car.
You don't have a car. And the whole place has a fence around it. And Effie's trying to convince herself that maybe this man is just walking home. What do you mean he's cutting through the property of the gardens of this mansion, right? No. You see somebody out there and then you turn around and all of a sudden you turn back and he's gone and you hear someone walking above you, even though you know that you personally locked every single door and window in this house. I would be sobbing if I were Effie.
I'd be under
Tell
the bed.
Me that's not the scariest scenario.
Yeah.
They're like, you know, in like realistically, this man is inside this house. There's no other explanation. And then for Mr. March to come out and be like, Oh,
Go
no,
to
it's okay.
bed.
But he himself is
Oh
like
my
barely keeping it
gosh.
together because he's trying to keep her calm.
Yeah, I'm so sick of this whole gaslighting of Effie. Like,
Right.
let the woman be scared. It's scary. Like,
Okay, that's my spiel. I've
Wow.
ranted enough there. So that's, yeah. But otherwise, I think it's pretty good revision
Yeah.
of it. So
yeah. I feel like there was something else we wanted to talk about. Oh, Nancy selling valuables.
Oh my gosh. This is so presumptuous of her.
Mhm. Yeah. I think I don't know how they do this in the original text. In the revised text, it's kind of implied that she's checking with Mr. March before she sells things that she does. But it's definitely weird that she finds the objects herself. She, I guess, goes to Mr. March and is like, "Hey, I'm going to sell these. It'll bring in some money." Apparently, he didn't notice because he doesn't have a good enough eye for antiques or something, but Nancy does. And so Nancy picks the objects out. She takes them. She's like, "I'm going to sell them." He's like, "Okay." And she takes them and goes and finds a price for them, gets the money, and then takes it back to Mr. March. Like, and she does this repeatedly. She does it at least 3 times. She does it with the bottles. She does it with the shoe buckles. She does it with like a candlesticks or something, some other antiques.
Some hat boxes as well.
Yes.
Some lamps, I think. Yeah.
Yes. So like she does it frequently enough where like this is like a whole process. I cannot imagine this happening at all. Like, I don't understand how she's like, "Hey, you have some really valuable antiques upstairs, I've noticed." I would imagine that she could say, if you wanted to sell them, they could fetch a really good price. You should consider doing that. If you want, I can arrange to take them to be sold. If that would be helpful to you. Or I can have someone come here to look at them. Whatever you want. But she doesn't do that. She just like is like, "Hey, these would be great to sell. Can I sell them?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then she just does. I guess it's like, how can you sell someone else's like things and like not check with them on like the price of them? Like how much they're going for, but Nancy is just, I mean, she does try to get the best price for them. Like, I know for the antique bottles, she ends up not selling them to Mr. Dite because he lowballs her an offer. And she's like, "I cannot sell them to you for that. Like, it's not for me. The money is like, they're not my property. Like, I have to get a better price for my friend." But like, still, like, I mean, I know that we as the reader know that like we're honorable, that Nancy is honorable and she's not trying to do that, but to just consider, like, if I were in Nancy's shoes, me personally, and like feeling okay and justified to sell someone's things for them, wild.
Nancy, this man has basically no furniture. He literally doesn't even have dishes to eat off of because he had to sell his silverware and his dishes and everything. And you find like the few belongings that he still had, like sentimental items. She finds this trunk in the attic with his wife's wedding dress in it, and then underneath that is some stuff, and she's like, "I'm gonna just go sell these." And it's like, you don't think that might be sentimental to him, that the things with his wife's wedding dress might be important enough and valuable, and or, you know, like it doesn't matter what value it is because it's so sentimental to him, he wouldn't sell it anyway, and you just take it and do it, and it turns out to be something that he genuinely didn't want, and it was fine. But like, what if it wasn't, Nancy? Like, come on, the few things that he has left, don't you think that maybe there's a reason he might want to keep like 1 or 2 of his personal belongings?
Yeah, well, it's just such a weird mindset to be like, I'm going to go help this guy, and the way that you think that you can help is by being like an appraiser in his attic and like being like, "Well, this is really valuable," surely he's thought about selling everything. Like, clearly he has thought about selling everything he owns. Like, you don't think, like,
he's pretty much already done that, except for a few like very important items.
So just like the assumption of like, I'm gonna go into this attic and I'm gonna pick out the things that I think should be sold is like treating him like he's an idiot or careless.
No, she definitely is.
Yeah.
And not that she like should have to spend her own money or that she anything like that, but it's just so so much in contrast to Sign of the Twisted Candles after just finishing that, where every single second Nancy just throws her own money at the problem. It's like, oh, I'll pay for it. Oh, I'll buy that. Oh, I can get you one of those. Why don't you come stay at my house? Why don't we go shopping for this? And there's none of that in this. It's not like, oh, why don't I just buy you guys some groceries? It's like, okay, what if I take your stuff and then we'll use that to pay for the things that I want you to have, like the maid that I'm requiring you to hire
that I've hired for you, except with your money.
Right.
That you don't have yet, but don't worry, you will, because I'm going to sell your things to get it.
Right.
The presumption. Yeah.
It is just a little weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just kept happening, too. It's like, okay, I'm glad that you found the stuff that, like, they're good for the month now, but okay.
This is what I mean. This is also lends to my irritation, too, because I'm like, just go through the whole attic one time. Just do all of it at once.
Yes. Just then make your list.
Make a list. Figure out what's there. Talk to him about things he could sell. Get his permission. Figure out what you want to do about those things. Do it one time so you don't have to keep going back up to the attic and searching more, driving all around God's creation to different antique stores, different people, trying to sell all this stuff. I mean, for real.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, so when we have the game, we are going to, who are our suspects? It's the Mr. Jenner, the music guy, and his music studio, his office that we'll have. And then we'll also have Mr. Dight's factory.
Yeah.
And Bushy Trot working there.
Okay, but the problem here, though, is I feel like all of them, like, are culprits. Like, I feel like in the traditional, like, Her Interactive Nancy Drew PC game setup, we have 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, handful of suspects. And one of them is the culprit.
But the rest of them will have, like, red herrings.
Secrets or red herrings, yes.
Or they are somehow background related. And so we could we tweak it a little bit to where, like, oh, that music thing really, what you really are innocent, but it does look like you were plagiarizing, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yes, but I feel like here when the ultimate goal is money, and both Mr. Jenner and Mr. Dight are profiting off of the plagiarism. That, in a way, makes them culpable for it. I don't know. I just feel there's got to be...
Too many culprits.
Too many culprits. I almost wonder if we should get rid of the whole Silk second case subplot entirely. Get rid of the Dights. Get rid of that.
You're right. Like you said at the beginning, it should focus more on the, like, music plagiarizing and go to that office and everything.
Because for an Nancy Drew game, one, that's way more educational, way more interesting and compelling, plus pretty music and lots of opportunity for, like, musical notation puzzles and, like, music production stuff. I feel like that's just like a dearth of opportunity there.
Sound equipment puzzles or mini games, anything like that.
So much. So, like, there's that. So I feel like you have to keep that. But so then I feel like we should have a music producer character, but I feel like the plagiarism aspect somehow should not involve him. And there's, like, a second, there's got to be some kind of second plot. Maybe, like, a romance plot that he could be involved in somehow. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here now, but, like...
maybe Horace does come into it. Maybe he's one of the other musicians that works there. The younger Horace, I mean, the one that asked Nancy to the dance. And then that could be the romance plot.
Yes.
And so we have this, like, handsome younger guy who's flirting with Nancy, and she's not super interested.
Because of
But
Ned.
she does kind of think, because of Ned, but she does kind of think that he's a little suspicious.
But Ned also isn't answering his phone. We can't reach Ned right now. Ned's not a
Darn
phone
it.
character in this one. Well, and I do feel like there should also be, like, some kind of, like, dance or performance aspect to it, right? Because there's the music thing. So maybe they're gearing up for some kind of, like, big performance or something at the end of it, and that's our game deadline, right? Is that we have to figure out who the plagiarist is before the concert or something. Or, yeah.
And, so instead of a dance, we'll just have a concert that they're trying to go to at the end of the game. Okay, I like that. And then the Mr. March stuff can pretty much stay the same with the, like, secret attic. We just won't, well, I mean, I guess in a game it makes sense for you to be able to come and go as many times as you want to that location and look around. But every time you do come back, a new puzzle pops up or some new passageway or something.
Okay. I feel like Mr. March should only be a phone character. he's the one who's hired Nancy to come out, and he's given her the keys to his house, you know, told her whatever. And so that's how she gets there and able to explore. Susan, we can age up.
Yes.
Age up, make an adult. Maybe she's working at the like music production company or something. Maybe she's like an admin assistant or something here. And she's the one who's realized that the music is being plagiarized at this place, but it hasn't been released yet. It's going to be debuted at the concert.
Yes.
There it is.
And it's still her father's music, though?
Yes.
I'm trying to decide if anybody should actually live at the house, and maybe it's like even more decrepit because nobody lives there anymore. And he's like, oh, well, you know, I have this old house that like we have all this junk in. I never cleaned it out and I want to sell it soon. Maybe you could try to find some old clues there.
I feel like Susan should be, no, I don't know. Yeah, maybe Susan is more like Phip, and that she's writing music that's based off of her father's works.
Oh, I like that.
But her father doesn't really care about it because he's never published it or whatever, but she's found like his music is what's being plagiarized at the thing. And so she's like, I know it because I'm making music based off of it. Right. But I can't prove that it's my dad's music.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I love it. I love it.
You guys, hire us, okay?
I love it.
We're so good at this.
We're going to find the file that deals with the music industry. We'll read that one too. We'll pull all the good elements out of that, and we'll just combine them all. It'll be perfect.
Yeah. Anyway.
Interactive, I really need this as a game. I think that final puzzle with the piano desk would be such a good puzzle. I feel like, yeah, you could do so much with it.
Oh, yeah. Easy. Easy. You have to play a certain song on the piano in order to get the drawer to open, obviously. Like...
And you have to find that book to read before you can figure out how to play the piano. And then there's a secret or a puzzle that you have to do to open the secret passageway to the door.
Yeah, you have to learn something about how pianos are made or something. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like Susan's music based off of her father's music should be something much more modern, like dance housey, like kind of a thing though, because that would be really cool.
It doesn't have to be 1944 popular music by any means. No.
No. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that would be fun. That would be a fun game.
It would.
I would enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out if you could find some other theme to add into it as well, not just the music, some sort of haunting something, because it's ripe with that skeleton right there. Like he could spook us or something. I don't know.
I feel like this might be overplayed in the games, but you could make Susan's mom dead too.
Yeah. Well, she is, so.
Right. Yeah. Or maybe you know what? Maybe we gender swap it, because I feel like the Lady Ghost trope is really played out, and I don't like it anymore. But I feel like
Phip's ghost.
Phip is the dad, but
his ghost is guarding the attic.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we get a haunting every time we try to go out. Yes,
there we go. And also that brings into like the family history kind of a theme, and it's related to the house and also to the music, and we can get some interesting themes about like remembering and memory and what ghosts are, about being memory, and music, how music can help us remember, and things about grief and things like that.
Ooh, I like that.
Right there.
And also I want to keep the wallpaper scene as well.
Oh,
where
obviously.
She like finds the clues behind the wallpaper. That is too perfect.
Too lovely.
Love it.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, Her Interactive. We've got game 35 ready.
Yeah. Anyway.
What else?
I don't think I have anything else.
I think that's all I've got as well.
Okay. Flashlight score?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to give it a 4.
Yeah.
4 flashlights.
That's what I would say too. 4 feels right. Because I think it was really good. It was a good story. It certainly got our juices flowing, our creative juices flowing, you know. Yes. So for that alone. But there were just a few things about it that annoyed me. I felt like we're a little bit lazy. And so, or, you know, like a little bit too tropey. And there's some some of it was just like a little high-handed. And so I feel like for that reason it loses a flashlight. But overall, really good, really solid. I could definitely see why people like it.
Oh, yeah.
4 stars or 4 flashlights.
I have no idea what we're doing next.
Oh, really? Well, I get to surprise you then, Kori.
Yay.
Next up, regular Drews, we are going to be covering another mystery story. This one, number 35, The Haunted Showboat.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes!
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
This one's New Orleans, right?
It's Nolans, baby.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, I'm so excited. I feel like this has been on my TBR for forever. Like from the moment that we started this podcast, I always had in my mind, we probably need to read The Haunted Showboat. I feel like this is so iterative. There's so much stuff that's based off of this. This particular mystery story, I know there's a Scooby-Doo episode of The Haunted Showboat, which we talked about in a Scoop Sesh. And so so I'm really excited. Plus, is this the one that had the misprint on the cover?
Yes.
Okay.
I was just about to say, we're going to have to pay close attention to how they describe the hair in this one, because this is, of course, the first cover where she is printed as a redhead. Wasn't intentional. So I wonder if they still describe her as blonde or if she's Mortician by now.
Yeah.
But this is about the time that change happened. So
also, I think this may be one of my favorite covers, just in general.
Right?
It is a beautiful cover.
It's gorgeous.
Which we'll talk about in the episode, but it's just iconic. And Bess's face is so good.
Right?
Anyway, very exciting. So that is what we will be discussing next time, and we will see you then, regular Drews.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Regular Nancy Drew. Email us at regularnancydrew@gmail.com.
If you like this episode, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe.
You can also follow us on Instagram at Regular Nancy Drew and Twitter at RegularND.
You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons at the $3 level vote on upcoming episode topics and get exclusive access to our Scoop Sesh series.
And all patrons receive early access to each episode as well as weekly bonus content.
And to all you regular Drews out there,
thanks for listening.